Chapter 442. The appearance of a nascent soul cultivator made the second floor of Jingshu Pavilion quiet down all of a sudden. Even the customers who were previously talking in low voices stopped talking at the same time. Intentionally or unintentionally, their gazes landed on the new nascent soul cultivator. Although there were many nascent soul cultivators in Yunzhong, they weren't people they could casually meet. 8 or 9 out of 10 cultivators below the core formation realm had never seen a nascent soul cultivator in their entire lives. The nascent soul senior in front of them looked to be about 30 years old. He had a handsome face and a heroic spirit. However, although he looked young, his pitch-black hair was mixed with a few strands of white hair, adding a bit of vicissitudes to his appearance. But it was also because of this that his originally outstanding demeanor carried a sense of tiredness and loneliness, which attracted the gazes of others even more. Senior, it's our honor to have you here at Jingshu Pavilion. Junior is Jingshu Pavilion's shopkeeper, Lu Xiaoqing. What can I do for Senior? Looking at this senior, Lu Xiaoqing's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. She had seen countless people and had seen many more handsome men in the cultivation world, but she had never seen such a figure. However, she didn't forget that this was a nascent soul senior. She immediately restrained her thoughts and respectfully invited him to a private room. The screen around the private room isolated them from other people's gazes. The other two foundation building cultivators had already taken away the goods they just traded. Lu Xiaoqing stood respectfully to the side, waiting for instructions. Cough, cough. The nascent soul cultivator covered his mouth and coughed twice before speaking. Do you have any medicinal pills for healing injuries in your shop? Lu Xiaoqing was stunned, but she suddenly understood. This senior looked young, but he had white hair. As it turned out, he was injured. Although she had such guesses in her heart, she still answered respectfully, Senior, our shop indeed has several medicinal pills for healing injuries. However, Senior's cultivation level is at the nascent soul realm. Even if we have some inherited spiritual pills, they might be of no use to Senior. The nascent soul cultivator nodded. He didn't seem surprised. He threw a jade slip and said, since that's the case, take a look and see if we have these materials. Yes. Lu Xiaoqing picked up the jade slip and carefully read it. She then smiled and said, what a coincidence. If Senior had come earlier, we really wouldn't have some things. Coincidentally, a cultivator just sold us a lot of materials, among which were the spiritual plants and monster cores that Senior needed. Really? This coincidence caused the nascent soul cultivator's eyebrows to arch up. However, that was all. He calmly asked, is the age enough? Our shop's appraiser has seen it. It should meet Senior's requirements. Lu Xiaoqing paused and asked, Junior will go get it now and show it to Senior. The nascent soul cultivator nodded. He silently sipped his tea and coughed from time to time, not sparing her a single glance. Lu Xiaoqing did not dare to be negligent. She immediately returned to the counter and gave a few instructions to the building foundation stage cultivator who was sorting the items. Soon, she came back with a few spiritual herbs and demon cores. Senior, please take a look. Opening the jade box, there were 5th rank and 6th rank monster cores. Apart from the relatively rare species, they weren't considered rare. There were also a few stalks of spirit grass that made his eyes light up. In the past few days, he had traveled to almost all the big cities in the northern part of Eastern Tang, but he still hadn't found these spiritual herbs. Some people hadn't even heard of them, while some people knew about them, but they said these spiritual herbs were rarely produced in the clouds. He had almost given up hope and looked for another spiritual herb. However, he had never expected that he would find it in Cloud Wing City. Lu Xiaoqing observed his expression. At this moment, she was certain that if there were no accidents, this transaction could be considered a success. She couldn't help but smile. Today's luck was really good. Although she spent hundreds of thousands of spirit stones, the items she bought were extremely valuable, and she also made 2 big deals. The things that Senior Yi and this senior wanted were all worth tens of thousands of spirit stones. Yes, I'll take all of these. While she was meditating, the nascent soul cultivator put down the spiritual herbs in his hand and spoke. Lu Shaoqing smiled and bowed, saying, "Then, Junior will put them away for Senior?" The nascent soul cultivator nodded and said, "How much are they worth?" Lu Shaoqing quickly put away the spiritual herbs and demon cores in front of her, pasted talismans to prevent the loss of spiritual aura, counted them, and reported the total price. These things, after rounding them up, come to a total of 52,000 spirit stones. If Senior doesn't mind, please wait a moment. Junior will calculate the detailed list. The nascent soul cultivator said, "There's no hurry. Since you're the shopkeeper here, you should be well informed. Can I ask you a few questions?" Since a nascent soul cultivator asked, how could Lu Shaoqing refuse? She immediately said, "If Senior has something to ask, Junior will tell you everything I know." The cultivator coughed twice then asked, "Have you heard of the name Yi Shaotian?" Lu Shaoqing thought for a moment. "Senior," the nascent soul cultivator continued, "she's a female core formation cultivator. She should be in the late stage already." He paused for a moment then added, "Maybe she's already formed her nascent soul. She's young, in her 20s, very beautiful." Speaking up to this point, the cultivator stopped talking with a slightly hesitant expression on his face. These descriptions really couldn't be considered characteristics. Among female core formation cultivators, many were in their 20s, young, and beautiful. However, if he were to talk about their real characteristics, he felt that it wasn't enough. Sure enough, after Lu Shaoqing heard this, she was very hesitant. "Senior, what you said is really hard to distinguish. Moreover, should be in the late stage already, and maybe she's already formed her nascent soul, were too vague. Could it be that this Senior also didn't know the cultivation level of the person he was looking for?" However, the name Yi Shaotian did sound a little familiar. She thought carefully for a moment, and a thought flashed through her mind. She then furrowed her brows in suspicion. After pondering for a moment, she finally said, "Senior, Junior has never seen the female core formation cultivator you're talking about. However, Junior has heard of the name Yi Shaotian." "Oh." The nascent soul cultivator raised his brows and looked at her. "Go ahead." More than 10 years ago, Junior heard that there was a core formation martial uncle in the sect who was on good terms with a core formation senior named Yi Shaotian. That senior was very young, but his cultivation level was already in the late stage of the core formation realm. However, that senior was a male cultivator, not a female cultivator. After hearing this, the nascent soul cultivator remained silent. Lu Shaoqing waited for a while, but he didn't say anything. She couldn't help but call out, "Senior?" Upon hearing her voice, the nascent soul cultivator finally asked, "Then do you know where he went later?" Lu Shaoqing shook her head and said, "Junior doesn't know. I remember this matter only because Junior has been taking care of the shop for the sect for many years, so I've always paid attention to people and matters. If Senior wants to inquire about this Senior Ye's whereabouts, Junior can report to the sect on Senior's behalf." Upon hearing this, the cultivator nodded and said, "You can settle the bill for me first." "Yes." Lu Shaoqing respectfully withdrew from the room. There was no one else in the private room. The nascent soul cultivator pondered for a while, then took out an animal skin parchment from his bosom. There was a drawing of a young woman on the polished animal skin parchment. He was familiar with her appearance, but he'd never heard of her name. Qingwei. "Tianga, I know it's you, but the people in Yunzhong said Qingwei has been missing for more than 10 years. Where am I supposed to find you?" After leaving Jingshu School's shop, she didn't immediately go to Yushi Building to rest. Instead, she found another tool refining shop and entered it. Half a day later, she came out of the tool refining shop and spent a large amount of spirit stones. During her years in she found a stock of black iron core wood. If it was made into a boat, it was said to be able to withstand the gales and huge waves on the sea. Since she was going to returning ruined sea this time, she decided to refine this black iron core wood into a magic weapon first to increase her chances of success. However, her own tool refining technique really wasn't good enough, so she thought it would be better to ask someone else to refine it for her. Yunzhong was so big, so it wasn't difficult to find a tool refining master who could refine magic weapons. After all, black iron core wood was rare, so she couldn't afford to waste it. Fortunately, when she passed by Uni City in the past, she heard that there were several tool refining shops with good craftsmanship in the city. She found one with the best reputation and entrusted this matter to him. After that, she took care of some miscellaneous matters before returning to Yushi Building and asking for a quiet courtyard to stay. She meditated and adjusted her breath while waiting for news. She hadn't been to Eastern Tang Country for nearly 10 years. When she was talking to the shopkeeper of Yushi Building just now, she heard an interesting piece of news. The three major righteous sects had jointly announced to the world that the real Fuxing sword had appeared, and they invited the owner of the Heavenly Devil Pagoda to gather in returning Ruin Sea to discuss this important matter. As soon as she heard this news, Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. If it was before, she might have really suspected that the Fuxing sword in her hand was fake. However, she had triggered the restriction in the Fuxing sword and was personally taught by Fu Yaozi, so it was needless to say whether the Fuxing sword was real or fake. Presumably, the three major righteous sects deliberately released this news to attract Qin Wei to show up. This plan wasn't brilliant, but it was profitable. If Qin Wei was really still in Yunzhong, she would most likely not be able to resist verifying it. After Fu Yaozi heard this, he said contemptuously, "A bunch of idiots. Even if the Fuxing sword fell into their hands, so what? Can they still find someone who can make the Fuxing sword recognize a master?" This was the first time Mo Tiange heard Fu Yaozi talk about others in such a tone. This master of hers had a good temper and had always been a modest gentleman. However, when it came to his Fuxing sword, he couldn't help it. Mo Tiange already knew that the 5 sacred objects needed to recognize a master before they could be used. The 3 major cultivation groups were in a hurry to find the Fuxing sword. Perhaps they already found a master for the 3 sacred objects in their hands? However, this matter couldn't be blamed on the cultivators of the 3 major cultivation groups. They didn't know that the Fuxing sword had already recognized a master. Most likely, they just wanted to get the Fuxing sword and quickly find a suitable master. The people of Jingshu Pavilion acted very quickly. The next day, they delivered the items and spirit stones. After Mo Tiange checked them, the money and goods were settled. Several days later, after wasting more than half of the black iron core wood in the tool refining shop, they finally made a magic weapon. This magic weapon was named the 10,000-mile solitary boat by the tool refining master. Although this name was very vulgar, Mo Tiange was too lazy to object. It didn't matter what it was called. What was important was that this magic weapon could really withstand the strong gales and huge waves in the sea. After getting the 10,000-mile solitary boat and paying the accommodation fee, Mo Tiange didn't stay any longer and set off for returning Ruin Sea. Several days later, at the end of the month, Lu Shaoqing delivered a batch of rare treasures to Jingshu School according to the rules. Coincidentally, she met the nascent soul senior who went to Jingshu School to inquire about Yi Xiaotian, and was left behind by the school's nascent soul grandmaster. When this nascent soul senior saw a bottle of medicinal pills, his gaze was immediately attracted. Jingshu School's head Grand Supreme Elder, Progenitor Miao Ying, noticed his expression and asked with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Qin, is there something you're interested in here?" The nascent soul cultivator surnamed Qin was still staring at the bottle of medicinal pills. He asked, "Fellow Daoist Miao Ying, you don't mind if I take a look, right?" "Of course. It's not like it's anything good. If fellow Daoist Qin takes a fancy to it, you can just take it," Progenitor Miao Ying said with a smile. Although these things were precious, they were nothing to a nascent soul cultivator. If she could use this chance to befriend a powerful middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, it would definitely be worth it. After getting permission, the cultivator surnamed Qin raised his hand and the jade bottle automatically flew into his hand. He carefully examined the jade bottle. It seemed like this was the real treasure. Finally, he opened the bottle and sniffed the medicinal pills inside. Immortal Wind Dew. he muttered to himself. In the next moment, he raised his head and looked at Lu Shaoqing with a sharp gaze. Junior, where did you get this medicinal pill? Lu Shaoqing was startled by his gaze and hastily answered, a cultivator sold it to Jingshu School. Oh, that cultivator seems to have quite the affinity with Senior. Most of the spiritual herbs and monster cores that Senior wanted were sold to the store by that cultivator. When he heard this, his expression changed and he asked again, what's his name? What's his cultivation level? What does he look like? When did he sell it to the store? Where did he go? After hearing this series of questions, Lu Shaoqing didn't dare to neglect and answered one by one. Junior only knows that his surname is Yi. He's a core formation realm male cultivator with the appearance of a young scholar. On the day that Senior came to the store, this Senior Yi came to sell a large amount of materials, just right after Senior came. As for where he went, Junior doesn't know. A young scholar with the surname Yi was exactly the same as the Yi Shaotian that others said. He took a deep breath, stood up and cupped his hands towards progenitor Miao Ying. Fellow Daoist Miao Ying, I'm afraid the person I'm looking for has already appeared. Thank you for your hospitality these past few days. I'll take my leave first. Chapter 443. A month later, on the coast of the Sea of Returning Ruins in the south of Yunzhong, a young scholar stood in the air, looking down at the island under his feet. The island wasn't big, only dozens of miles in circumference. Looking down from above, it looked like a green leaf, so it was called One Leaf Island. In terms of scale, One Leaf Island was pitifully small. Any town or city in eastern Tang had a bigger market than it. But in terms of scale, there was no market in Yunzhong that had a higher standard than One Leaf Island. On this island, core formation cultivators could be seen everywhere, and nascent soul cultivators often showed up. Even the merchants who took care of the shops were cultivators above the foundation building realm. The reason why there were so many high-grade cultivators gathered on this small island with very ordinary spiritual qi was due to its perfect geographical location. Cultivators in Yunzhong usually went to two places to hunt demonic beasts. One was the North Sea in the north, and the other was the Sea of Returning Ruins in the south. In the North Sea, there happened to be a large island called North Pole Island. There were countless demonic beasts around it, ranging from low to high level, so a large number of aura refining and core formation cultivators gathered on North Pole Island to hunt beasts for a living, forming a huge beast core market. But the Sea of Returning Ruins was different. Its beast market wasn't big, and compared to North Pole Island, it was pitifully small. However, it was more famous among high-level cultivators than North Pole Island. This was because the sea beasts in the Sea of Returning Ruins were mostly in the 5th rank and above, and the corpses and beast cores produced by these demonic beasts were exactly what cultivators above the core formation realm needed. One Leaf Island happened to be located at an estuary of the Sea of Returning Ruins, so its location was excellent. Over time, cultivators who came to the Sea of Returning Ruins to hunt beasts formed a small but high-end beast market there. Mo Tiange stood in the air for a while, then asked, Master, do you want to stay here? I'm afraid those late nascent soul cultivators are all gathered here, right? The Fusheng sword let out a soft cry, and Fu Yaozi's voice came. Go. You've made the Fusheng sword recognize you as its master. With me here, those cultivators can't do anything to you no matter how high their cultivation levels are. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment, then believed him. After living together for several years, she and Fu Yaozi had developed a true master-disciple relationship. She believed that her master wouldn't be wrong. He landed at the edge of the One Leaf Island and registered himself at the entrance of the town under the name Yi Shaotian. This One Leaf Island was indeed worthy of its reputation of having the highest standards. As soon as they entered the town, they saw many core formation cultivators walking back and forth on the streets. Many of them were foundation building cultivators who were hawking their wares and taking care of the shops. In other cultivator towns, there weren't many aura refining cultivators and mortals. Most of them were just doing odd jobs in the shops. Whether it was in the Celestial Pole or Yunzhong, she had never seen so many high-level cultivators gathered in one place. Moreover, among these high-level cultivators, there were often one or two nascent soul cultivators coming and going. One Leaf Island is still the same as before. Fu Yaozi sighed. Although he was shapeless and only had a wisp of divine sense left, his secret technique was astonishing. He could still sense everything around him. Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Master seems to be very familiar with One Leaf Island." Fu Yaozi said, "I'm not like you. Without the support of a sect, from the moment I stepped onto the path of immortality to the moment I formed my nascent soul, I've always been a rogue cultivator. The life of an individual cultivator isn't easy. When I was in the aura refining and foundation building realm, I was very down and out. After I formed my gold core, I often came to One Leaf Island to hunt demonic beasts, which made my life a lot better." Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but nod to show she understood. She had experienced the hardships she and second uncle went through in the past, so she was very touched by what Fu Yaozi said about being down and out and out. However, thinking about it this way, this master of hers was really amazing. With an incomplete art of the origin and no heaven-defying immortal fate, he grew from a down-and-out low-level cultivator to the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong. She didn't know how many hardships he had to go through to achieve this. "Master, should we go there and rest for a while before going out to sea?" "No," Fu Yaozi said, "you can't go out to sea alone." Mo Tiange was stunned. "What do you mean, Master?" Fu Yaozi chuckled. "That place can only be opened if 5 keys are combined into one. What's the use of going there alone? We'll naturally wait for the others to go together." But Mo Tiange was full of questions. Even if her master was giving her ideas behind the scenes, she was only a core formation cultivator in the end. How could she compete with those late-stage, nascent soul cultivators? Once the secret place was opened, not to mention benefits, she'd probably be eaten until not even her bones were left. "Don't worry," Fu Yaozi said faintly, "Master naturally won't let you suffer any losses." "Master, I can't not worry," Mo Tiange admitted calmly. "Although I have the Fuxing sword in my hand and Master as my backing, I'm only one person in the end. They also have holy objects in their hands. Not only are they powerful, but the forces behind them are also astonishing." Fu Yaozi smiled. "It's useless even if they have holy objects." "Huh? Why?" Mo Tiange was puzzled. Fu Yaozi said, "To tell you the truth, among the so-called 5 saints, the other 4 have disciples to pass on their inheritance to, but Master doesn't. Therefore, when Master sealed my divine sense, I did something. As for the other 4, I only sealed their divine sense and part of their secret technique. If a disciple obtained the key and passed on the secret technique to them, their divine sense would dissipate. Only Master's divine sense could exist for a long time." Mo Tiange once witnessed Wanderer Ziwei's method and was left an imprint in her sea of knowledge. Wanderer Ziwei was so talented that he sealed his divine sense for thousands of years. Even after being triggered, his divine sense wouldn't dissipate and could even continue to exist. Therefore, she never doubted Fu Yaozi's method of sealing divine sense. After all, he was the legendary #1 person in Yunzhong. As for the other members of the 5 saints, she also thought the same. They were called the 5 saints, so even if the others were a bit weaker than her master, they shouldn't be too much weaker. Now that she heard Fu Yaozi's words, she realized her master's skill was a notch higher. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange suddenly realized something and sighed. "Master, you're not as honest as you look." "What are you talking about?" Fu Yaozi reprimanded. "Although I consider myself an upright and above-board person, I'm not a person without schemes. Yes, from an individual cultivator without any foundation to the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong, no one could surpass him for more than 100,000 years. How could this master of hers be completely upright and pure?" With this thought, she felt a lot more at ease. Now that she was relieved, she also became interested in the market square of this One Leaf Island. Just as she was about to take a stroll, she suddenly felt a powerful divine sense stopping on her. She immediately looked up and saw a cultivator in his 50s sitting by the window on the second floor of a restaurant. He was dressed like a wealthy man from the secular world and was staring at her with a sharp gaze. This person's spiritual aura pressure was strong, but he was a nascent soul cultivator. For a moment, Mo Tiange couldn't figure out what this cultivator meant, but she had Fu Yaozi by her side, so she didn't show any fear. Instead, she smiled at him and cupped her hands to show her respect to this senior. The cultivator was stunned for a moment as if he didn't expect she would act like this. Soon after, both his divine sense and his gaze moved away from her. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief and continued to stroll around the market. It didn't matter whether this person noticed her illusion or something else. In any case, she'd already arrived at the Sea of Returning Ruins. It was only a matter of time before she came into contact with those top nascent soul cultivators in Yunzhong. Brother Nan, you're... On the second floor of the restaurant, a young Taoist sitting across from the cultivator looked at him with a smile and a hint of confusion in his eyes. The male cultivator called Brother Nan stroked his grizzled beard and said, "It's nothing. I just happened to discover that this junior is a bit unusual." "Oh." The young Taoist turned his head to look outside the window. People were coming and going, but that core formation cultivator was already gone. What's unusual about him? This person has a powerful divine sense fluctuation. Moreover, I only glanced at him for a moment, but he immediately noticed me. Is that so? The young Taoist swept his gaze across the street and said with a meaningful smile, "Recently, One Leaf Island has been really lively. Not only did all those old monsters come into being, but the juniors in the core formation realm are also so outstanding." The cultivator surnamed Nan also smiled. He leisurely held his wine cup and took a sip. "Brother Rui, based on our many years of friendship, how about you give me a hint? What's your 5 Elements Valley planning to do this time?" "A hint?" The young Taoist rubbed his nose and looked at the person in front of him with a faint smile. "What's there to be a hint? Our 5 Elements Valley's strength is inferior, we're just here to watch the fun and take advantage of the situation. On the other hand, Brother Nan, your Danxia sect brought a lot of people this time." "Heh." The cultivator surnamed Nan laughed self-deprecatingly. "Taoist Brother Rui, I might as well tell you the truth. Everyone knows the situation of our Dawning Pills sect. We really want to seize this opportunity. However, wanting is one thing, but I'm powerless." The cultivator surnamed Nan's words made the young Taoist feel sad. He sighed and said, "Isn't that right? Among the 5 great Tao cultivation groups, our 2 groups are the weakest, but at this time, the 5 holy relics unexpectedly appeared, and our strength is inferior. I really don't know if we're lucky or not." "Humph. Yuan Mu and the others invited us here. On the surface, they said we're all fellow Taoists and we don't dare to hog it for ourselves, but in reality?" The cultivator surnamed Nan sneered. "They have the holy relics in their hands, and their strength far surpasses us, middle-stage, nascent soul cultivators. We're just here to go through the motions." The young Taoist smiled while holding his cup. "Brother Nan, could it be that you still can't get over it? Who told you and I to be weaker than others, and our luck to be worse? If we advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm, even if we didn't obtain the holy relics, we could still compete with Yuan Mu and the others. Unfortunately, after so many years, you and I are still stuck at this bottleneck and can't advance. Naturally, we can only accept our fate." How could the cultivator surnamed Nan not understand this reasoning? In the end, he just sighed and said nothing. At this time, Mo Tiange was strolling in a tea house, listening to other people's gossip with great interest. The matter of the 5 saints was now a hot topic in Yunzhong. A large number of high-level cultivators gathered on One Leaf Island, and it happened to be the location of the incident, so it was naturally even more popular. During the past month, Mo Tiange had been traveling cautiously, but she didn't know this matter was actually this popular. As it turned out, in addition to the owner of the Heavenly Devil Tower, the 3 great sects also invited nascent soul cultivators from various big forces. Nominally, the things left behind by the 5 saints were the commonwealth of Yunzhong, so the 3 great sects didn't dare to hog it for themselves. Therefore, after the mysterious space was opened, all nascent soul cultivators could enter and explore it. But was that really the case? Mo Tiange didn't need to think to know the real reason. Now, the matter of the 5 saints had spread throughout Yunzhong, and it was no longer a secret only a few high-level cultivators knew. If the 3 great sects hoarded it for themselves, no matter how powerful they were, they wouldn't be able to withstand the joint attack of others. That being the case, they might as well share some of the benefits with others. In any case, they had the most important holy relics in their hands and were the strongest, so they would still get the biggest benefits in the end. But even though the nascent soul cultivators understood this reason, they still rushed to One Leaf Island like a flock of ducks. After all, when it came to fated chances, luck played a very important role. Who knew if they'd obtained a great fated chance? Deification. This was a temptation that nascent soul cultivators at the top of the cultivation world couldn't resist. Driven by benefits, they advanced wave after wave. Chapter 444. In just a few days, there were more and more nascent soul cultivators on One Leaf Island. Nascent soul cultivators who used to only see 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators swaggered through the market square now, and many of them were in the middle stage or higher. This gave Mo Tiange more pleasure. She asked for a room facing the street in an inn. When she had nothing to do, she leaned against the window and counted the nascent soul cultivators passing by. She discussed with Fu Yaozi with great interest their cultivation levels, sex, and approximate cultivation techniques. This rare childishness unexpectedly aroused Fu Yaozi's interest, and he enthusiastically discussed with her every day. In the beginning, Mo Tiange thought her master had been trapped inside the Fuxing sword for too long, so she was very interested in everything in the world. Later on, she slowly realized her master was deliberately cultivating her judgment. She was secretly moved when she realized this. Although she called Fu Yaozi master, deep in her heart, the closest master to her was Lord Daoist Jinghe. A few years couldn't compare to a few decades. However, Fu Yaozi's unreserved and careful teaching slowly made her feel reluctant. Every time she thought her master's divine sense might dissipate soon and leave her forever, she felt sad. Of course, this sadness was quickly suppressed. She knew from the beginning that that day would come, so she was mentally prepared. At the same time, she began to practice the technique to restrain devil cultivators. This law formula was obtained by Fu Yaozi from an ancient cultivator's cave dwelling. It was extremely suitable for those who practiced the primordial chaos cultivation method to cultivate. With Fu Yaozi's personal guidance, she was able to avoid any detours and cultivate at a rapid pace. Soon, she saw results. As for the things she bought in Cloud Wing City, she used them one by one either to refine magic weapons, to concoct medicinal pills, or to make formations. During this process, Fu Yaozi was dismissive of her tool refining level, expressing his disdain. Unfortunately, Mo Tiange didn't feel embarrassed at all. She wasn't a genius who was good at everything like Mo Yaoqing, so it was normal for her to have high and low talents in miscellaneous studies. Although she wasn't good at tool refining, her attainments in pill concocting and formations weren't something ordinary people could achieve. What Mo Tiange found interesting was that as the number of high-level cultivators on One Leaf Island increased, the number of spies in the market square also increased. Most of these spies were paying attention to core formation cultivators who entered the island for the first time. Although they didn't offend them, they were always monitoring them. With Fu Yao by her side, Mo Tiange had a well-thought-out plan. She just pretended she didn't see these informants and continued living her leisurely life. While she was passing her days leisurely, the most important figures of One Leaf Island finally arrived. In the center of One Leaf Island, there was a short peak. It was the place with the densest spirit chi on the island. Although this bit of spirit chi was not worth mentioning compared to the spirit chi of the major sects, it was still divided up by the major factions and built into branches. This short peak was located in the center of the market. Although there were guards on normal days, there were still people coming and going. Only these few days, there were layers of restrictions, and no one was allowed to enter. However, the cultivators of One Leaf Island and the disciples of the major sects did not dare to object because they knew that the top nascent soul cultivators in Yunzhong were gathered in the branch hall. Welcome grandmasters, martial uncles, to One Leaf Island. Several cultivators slowly walked into the branch hall of Joyun's sect amid the shouts of Joyun's sect's disciples. No need to be so polite. Get up. Master Daoist Yuanmu, who was walking at the front, waved his hand casually. Thank you, martial uncles. The branch head, a core formation cultivator from Joyun's sect, stood up. He was about to step forward and report to the nascent soul martial uncles so that he could leave a good impression on them and fight for a better future for himself. Senior martial brother, the martial uncles are tired, so you don't have to trouble yourselves. Just receive them the way you prepared them. If there are any problems, we'll naturally send someone to inform you. A young cultivator behind the nascent soul Grand Supreme Elders stopped him and said gently. This person was in the late stage of the core formation realm. He had a young face and a kind attitude, but there was an unquestionable decisiveness in his words. The branch head immediately recognized this person as Ling Yunhe, the sect leader of Joyun's sect and the young master of Ling clan. He didn't ask any more questions and cupped his hands in response. Yes, sect leader. However, he looked a little disappointed. Ling Yunhe smiled and said, Senior martial brother, don't worry. If you do things well, the martial uncles will know what to do. Originally, the branch heads of each branch were only in the foundation building realm, but One Leaf Island situation was special, so they used core formation cultivators. Being a branch head on One Leaf Island wasn't a difficult job because there weren't any high-level cultivators pressuring them and they could also fish for some benefits nearby. However, for core formation cultivators, the spirit veins on One Leaf Island were really lacking, and they couldn't focus on cultivation like they did in the sect. The gains didn't make up for the losses. Therefore, the branch leaders of the One Leaf Island were mostly old cultivators in the core formation stage who did not have any background. Now that they had such a grand event, they all wanted to show their faces in front of the grand elders in the nascent soul stage and win their favor so that they could be transferred back to the headquarters and get some benefits. That was what this branch head was thinking, but unfortunately, he was interrupted by Ling Yunhe. He was still feeling unhappy, but when he heard what Ling Yunhe said and thought about how Ling Yunhe, the sect head, comforted him like this, he felt much better. Thus, he politely agreed and went to do his work. After all the unrelated people left, Master Daoist Yuanmu asked, Brat, where's the person you arranged? He didn't mention his name, but everyone knew this was what the nascent soul ancestors called Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe stepped forward and said, Martial Uncle Yuanmu, please wait a moment. Martial Nephew has already informed him to come. Master Daoist Yuanmu nodded. Without saying anything else, he turned around and started chatting with his junior martial brothers. Before long, a foundation-building cultivator walked in respectfully. Disciple Ling Yishuan greets grandmasters. Master Daoist Yuanmu was a bit surprised to see this person. He didn't expect the person Ling Yunhe sent to handle such an important matter would actually be a foundation-building cultivator. However, this Ling brat had always handled matters appropriately, so he didn't think too much about it. He raised his hand and said, No need to be so polite. When Ling Yishuan stood up, Ling Yunhe asked, Xiao Shun, how's the matter going? Ling Yishuan respectfully lowered his head. He then took out a jade slip from his robe and answered, reporting to grandmasters and martial uncles, this is the list of core formation cultivators who recently came to One Leaf Island. Disciple has already ordered people to investigate them. Ling Yunhe took the jade slip then presented it to the nascent soul elders. The nascent soul elders looked at it one by one before returning it to him. Ling Yunhe looked through it then asked, Did you personally check on all these people? Reporting to martial uncle sect head, disciple has. The movements of all suspicious people are all within my grasp, so I can invite them at any time. Ling Yunhe nodded with satisfaction then turned around to report to the several elders in the hall. Martial uncles, should we immediately invite them? Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't answer. Instead, he glanced at his junior martial brothers. Ling Xiyu showed a faint smile then said, "It's better to do it sooner rather than later." Master Daoist Yuanmu nodded then glanced at Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe understood and left the branch hall with Ling Yishuan. After she finished cultivating for the day, Mo Tiange went out for a stroll. She exchanged a large number of spirit stones from Cloud Wing City, and One Leaf Island was the most high-end market in Yunzhong, targeting core formation cultivators. How could she let go of this opportunity? When she was free, she went out for a walk and bought some precious things, which might come in handy in the future. Even if she didn't have any use for them, it would still be good to bring them back to the celestial pole. After she finished strolling in the market, she returned to the inn. Before she entered her room, the Fuxing sword on her back suddenly let out a cry. Fu Yao's voice rang in her head. "Someone's here." Mo Tiange smiled but didn't mind. In the market square, although everyone wouldn't casually use their divine sense, it wasn't to the point where she didn't notice there was someone in her room. It was just that this was within her expectations. So many geniuses came looking for us, but their movements are too slow. Fu Yao smiled bitterly and said, "Why don't you say your illusory transformation technique is too brilliant? Even nascent soul cultivators have to be in the middle stage before they can discover the abnormality. Even those with weak divine senses can't do it." In fact, although Nia Wushang's illusory transformation technique was brilliant, it wasn't to this extent. The reason why Mo Tiange could use it so effectively was because she had the spirit concealing pendant. Facing her strange magic weapons, Fu Yao could only sigh in admiration. But the person's cultivation level doesn't seem high. Mo Tiange muttered as she pushed the door open. There were only 2 cultivators in the room, one sitting and one standing. One was in the core formation realm and the other in the foundation building realm. They were actually acquaintances. Upon seeing her coming in, their gazes fell on her. Mo Tiange's eyes darted around and immediately saw a jade disc-shaped magic weapon in one of their hands. As it turned out, they were able to see through her illusion because they used their magic weapons. "Fellow Daoist Qin, long time no see." Ling Yunhe stood up and politely clasped his hands to greet her. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile and withdrew her illusory transformation technique, revealing her original appearance. "It's indeed been a long time. Every time I wanted to look for fellow Daoist Ling, I was always hindered by mundane affairs. In the blink of an eye, it's been more than 50 years since we last met. Fellow Daoist Ling, how are you?" "Thank you for your concern, fellow Daoist Qin." "I'm fine." Ling Yunhe's eyes flashed. He looked at her and couldn't help but say, "After so many years, fellow Daoist Qin's cultivation level has advanced so quickly. I really admire you. Fellow Daoist Ling isn't bad either. You're hindered by mundane affairs and you're involved in disputes, but you're still able to make such progress. It's really rare." Ling Yunhe forced a smile but didn't say anything. The atmosphere was a bit strange. In the past, although the two of them didn't have a deep friendship, they talked naturally. Today, however, it was a superficial smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mo Tiange didn't blame Ling Yunhe. She understood the current situation very well. No matter what kind of friendship she had with Ling Yunhe in the past, he was still the school head of Juyan sect. From his standpoint, he had to consider the interests of the sect, even if she had previously saved his life. If the Ling Yunhe in the past was a peer she could befriend, then the Ling Yunhe today was someone she had to deal with. "Xiao Shun, you also came to One Leaf Island. We haven't seen each other for many years. How are you now?" Upon hearing her greeting, Ling Yishuan hastily cupped his hands and bowed. "Thank you for your concern, senior. Xiao Shun is very good." Mo Tiange smiled but didn't say anything. The 3 of them were silent for a while. Ling Yunhe finally said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, I have to thank you for helping me with the matter in Carefree Valley." Mo Tiange waved her hand and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Ling has already thanked me. There's no need to thank me again." Ling Yunhe was very serious. He took out a Qinkuan bag from his robe and handed it to her. I'm ashamed that I haven't fulfilled the reward I promised fellow Daoist Qin. I've kept these things with me for a long time. Today, I'll return them to you. Mo Tiange sighed, took the Qinkuan bag, and said, fellow Daoist Ling, you don't need to feel guilty. Our positions are different, so there's nothing we can do about it. Ling Yunhe's expression softened a little. How could he not understand this principle? If it were someone else, he wouldn't feel anything at all, but, fellow Daoist Qin. He called out with a sigh. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he swallowed his words. Then, his expression changed. He put on a gentle and refined smile like a mask and said, as long as you hand over the Fuxing sword, I can guarantee no one will harass you in the future. Chapter 445. Mo Tiange looked very calm and had a smile on her face. She didn't show any anger or helplessness from being threatened. This made Ling Yunhe feel he seemed to have missed something important, but he couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought. Fellow Daoist Ling, Mo Tiange said, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. Ling Yunhe widened his eyes. Why? He thought she was a smart person and wouldn't refuse to hand over something she shouldn't covet, no matter how precious it was. Since she could hand over the inescapable net, why couldn't she hand over the Fuxing sword? He took a deep breath and advised her cautiously, fellow Daoist Qin, you have to think about it carefully. You're alone, so how can you fight against so many nascent soul cultivators? If you hand it over, I can talk to the ancestors and give you some benefits to compensate for your loss. Mo Tiange smiled then heaved a sigh. This time, although she was standing on the opposite side of Ling Yunhe, he still remembered their old friendship, which moved her a bit. Fellow Daoist Ling, I can't hand it over because the Fuxing sword has recognized me as its master. Ling Yunhe stared at her for a long time before he found his voice again. Recognized you as its master? You've made the Fuxing sword recognize you as its master? Yes. Mo Tiange looked at him calmly. So, take me to see those seniors. I think they'll be very happy to see me. After Juoyan sect, the nascent soul cultivators of Yu Mountain Academy and Huayan Temple also arrived. In addition to Scholar Yu, there were also several nascent soul cultivators from Yu Mountain Academy and Baifu Mountain. Of course, most of these nascent soul cultivators were in the early stage. After all, it wasn't easy to advance after the nascent soul realm. In terms of numbers, the three groups had about the same number of nascent soul cultivators, but in terms of cultivation level, Juoyan's sect was undoubtedly the first. In addition to Master Daoist Yuanmu, there was also an iron-faced Daoist who was also in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. The others were all in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Realizing this, Scholar Yu and revered Wu Ming couldn't help but curse silently. That old man Yuanmu was truly cunning. He had 2 late-stage cultivators and several mid-stage cultivators. On One Leaf Island, they were still the strongest faction, but they had left all their early-stage cultivators in the sect. If anything happened, they could preserve Juoyan's sect's chances of survival and prevent their foundations from being shaken. Unfortunately, even if they knew, they couldn't change anything. The Juoyan sect dared to do this because they were powerful enough and had enough nascent soul cultivators. If it were them, if they left all the early-stage cultivators in the sect, they would not be able to bring many of them out. Mr. Yu, fellow Daoist Avidya, you finally arrived. Reverend Yuanmu brought all the nascent soul cultivators out to welcome them. Scholar Yu and revered Wu Ming returned the greeting, and the 3 parties only entered after exchanging pleasantries. After all the cultivators had taken their seats and exchanged greetings, Scholar Yu went straight to the point. Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, has the master of the Heavenly Devil Tower appeared? Yuanmu Zhenren said, there's news already, but we don't know his identity yet. That person sent a message saying that he will come as promised. That's good. Scholar Yu tapped the folding fan in his hand, looking rather pleased with himself. Revered Wu Ming smiled and said, Mr. Yu's foresight is truly marvelous. The matter regarding the Heavenly Devil Tower was indeed correct, but I wonder how's the Fusheng sword? Master Yuan Muzhenren was about to shake his head when he suddenly sensed something with his divine sense. He frowned and said, "We'll know in a moment." Standing outside the reception room of the Jiuyan Sex Branch Hall, Ling Yunhe took a deep breath, then looked at Mo Tiange. "Fellow Daoist Qin, please." Mo Tiange smiled. She didn't stand on ceremony and took the lead to enter. Staring at her back, Ling Yunhe's expression was complicated, but he also followed her inside. As soon as she entered the reception room, countless gazes fell on her. Among them were 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators and about 10 middle-stage and early-stage cultivators. This was Mo Tiange's first time seeing so many nascent soul cultivators gathered in one place. These cultivators' powerful spiritual aura pressure enveloped her, either intentionally or unintentionally. If she was an ordinary core formation cultivator, under the gazes and spiritual aura pressure of so many nascent soul cultivators, she'd probably break out in a cold sweat and lose her will. However, she was already in the peak stage of the core formation realm and her soul-refining art was successful, so she wasn't afraid of the spiritual aura pressure of nascent soul cultivators. Of course, there were so many of them, and there were even quite a few late-stage nascent soul cultivators among them, so she still felt very uncomfortable. Celestial Pole Cultivator Mo Tiange greets seniors. She smiled and politely saluted everyone. Master Yuan Muzhenren raised his eyebrows, and the others also looked surprised. Firstly, Mo Tiange's expression was so calm, as if she wasn't affected by the spiritual aura pressure at all. Secondly, the name she claimed wasn't Qin Wei, but Ling Yan's previous message said he'd brought Qin Wei back. Master Yuan Muzhenren instantly regained his composure. No need to be so polite. Master Yuan Muzhenren's gaze fell on Ling Yunhe, who also came in. He saw that Ling Yunhe also looked hesitant, but he still nodded at him. Master Yuan Muzhenren now knew what was going on. He smiled at Mo Tiange and said, "It seems this is little fellow Daoist's real origin and name." Since the other side was so friendly, Mo Tiange also smiled back. "Yes, senior must be Senior Yuanmu from Jiuyan sect?" Master Yuan Muzhenren nodded, then pointed at Venerable Avidya on the side. "This is Venerable Avidya from Huayan Temple." Little fellow Daoist should have met him before. Mo Tiange nodded, then saluted Venerable Avidya. "Senior Avidya, long time no see. How have you been?" Venerable Avidya still had the expression of a Maitreya Buddha. He put his palms together and saluted her. "Thanks to little fellow Daoist, I've been living well. It's only been 10 years since we last met, but little fellow Daoist's cultivation level has advanced again. Congratulations." After they finished greeting each other, Master Yuanmu pointed at Scholar Yu on the side. "This is Mr. Yu from Yu Mountain Academy." Mo Tiange couldn't help but find this young and refined teacher Yu somewhat similar to the young scholar she transformed into before. She couldn't help but feel interested, but she still politely saluted him. "Greetings, Mr. Yu." Scholar Yu just nodded with a smile. He didn't return her salute, nor did he answer. For a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, this was already considered very polite. Venerable Avidya was an exception. He was a Buddhist cultivator, so the principles he upheld were much gentler. Moreover, Venerable Avidya had always been amiable, so he returned the salute. Master Yuan Muzhenren picked up his teacup and took a sip. He didn't introduce her to the other cultivators, nor did he ask her to sit down. Mo Tiange also understood that in the eyes of these nascent soul seniors, she was only a core formation junior. Even if they were kind to her, they still didn't deserve too much courtesy. Therefore, she didn't care and just stood there calmly, letting others size her up. In any case, she was accompanied by Ling Yunhe. Oh, there were also 2 core formation cultivators present, and they were both her acquaintances, Jiawu and Han Shizhi. Both of their cultivation levels had advanced, and their Jiawu had already advanced to the middle stage. Han Shizhi, like her, had also reached the peak stage. Wasn't it said that only nascent soul cultivators participated in the Sea of Returning Ruins this time? Ling Yunhe was the sect head of Jiuyan's sect, so it was reasonable for him to come and handle the matter. She didn't know much about Han Shiji, but what about Jiwu? She remembered that Venerable Avidya's eldest disciple was Zhu Xian, and Jiawu wasn't even his disciple. Thinking up to this point, a thought flashed in her mind. Could it be that the two of them were the masters of the other two holy objects? Before she had time to think about it, Master Daoist Yuanmu said, "Little fellow Daoist, are you from the celestial pole?" Mo Tianga's eyes brightened. Senior also knows about the celestial pole? Master Daoist Yuanmu said slowly, "I know a thing or two." He looked up and glanced at Mo Tianga meaningfully. "Little fellow Daoist, you're only a core formation cultivator, but you actually came to Yunzhong from the celestial pole. You're not simple." Based on what he said, this Master Daoist Yuanmu also knew that the journey from Yunzhong to the celestial pole was difficult. Thinking about it, there were also many high-level cultivators in the celestial pole who knew about Yunzhong. It was just that the South Sea was difficult to cross, so they didn't know about Yunzhong. Junior was just lucky, that's all. Hee hee. Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't want to talk about this topic. In the next second, he stared at Mo Tianga with a fierce gaze, and his spiritual aura pressure rose sharply. "I heard little fellow Daoist isn't willing to hand over the Fusheng sword?" Under the deliberate spiritual aura pressure of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, Mo Tianga was shaken even though she had a secret technique. However, she quickly recovered and said calmly, "Correct. Now that things have come to this, even if Junior hands over the Fusheng sword, it'll be useless to seniors." "Oh." Master Daoist Yuanmu withdrew his spiritual aura pressure and said faintly, "Little fellow Daoist, please tell me." Upon seeing his expression, Mo Tianga thought in her heart that this Master Daoist Yuanmu was worthy of being the real head of Jiuyan's sect. Since he already knew she wasn't willing to hand over the Fusheng sword, Ling Yunhe must have told him the reason, but he insisted on listening to her say it in person. In this way, her momentum was stolen and she was at a disadvantage. However, she didn't care. "I won't hide it from Senior. Junior has already recognized the Fusheng sword as its master, so I can't give it to Senior," Mo Tianga said faintly. Once she said that, Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't react, but the others were shocked. Venerable Avidya even opened his eyes. Only then did Mo Tianga realize that this Venerable Avidya wasn't blind. "Junior." Scholar Yu closed the folding fan in his hand and asked with a calm expression, "That Fusheng sword actually recognized you as its master?" "Correct." Mo Tianga stared at this late-stage nascent soul cultivator and said, "Junior not only recognized the Fusheng sword as its master, but I also obtained Senior Fu Yaozi's inheritance." Upon hearing this, the expression of Master Daoist Yuanmu, who had always been very calm, changed greatly. He glared at her and said, "You obtained Fu Yaozi's inheritance?" He said this very loudly. He indeed had the demeanor of a cultivator who had lost his vitality. But no one cared about it now because everyone's reaction was the same as Master Daoist Yuanmu's. Mo Tianga, on the other hand, was in a very good mood. She ignored the many nascent soul cultivators' ugly expressions and said with a smile, "Correct. Speaking of which, Senior Fu Yaozi is worthy of being the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong. His divine sense has been sealed for several tens of thousands of years, but it actually still exists for so long. In the past few years, Junior obtained Senior Fu Yaozi's pointers and gained a lot." Clang, Mo Tianga keenly heard a light noise. Right after that, a nascent soul cultivator abruptly stood up with a magic weapon in his hand and shouted, "Senior Martial Brother Yuanmu, why are you being polite to this Junior? Does she, a mere core formation cultivator, want to take a share of our fated chances? I'd like to see what she can do if she loses her life." "Impudent!" Master Daoist Yuanmu shouted, glaring at that Jiuyan sect cultivator. "Do you think you can casually recognize a 5 saints item as its master?" The nascent soul cultivator was stunned after being reprimanded. "If we kill her, won't the Fusheng sword become a masterless item again?" "Idiot!" Master Daoist Yuanmu couldn't care less about the fact that there were outsiders in front of him. He glared fiercely at that person and said, "Sit down." The nascent soul cultivator reluctantly sat down, but his ferocious gaze was still fixed on Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, just smiled, looking completely unaffected. He. While the others were furious, revered Wu Ming laughed and said, "It seems little fellow Taoist came prepared, but I wonder if you have enough bargaining chips." Mo Tiange's gaze wandered as she asked with a smile, "The method to open the mysterious space, the specific path, the key points to pay attention to, and even the method to obtain the immortal fate, I wonder if that's enough?" Chapter 446. After a long time, Master Taoist Yuanmu took a deep breath and stared at Mo Tiange seriously. "Junior, other holy objects also have owners, and you're not the only one who knows how to open the mysterious space. As for the method to obtain the immortal fate you mentioned." He paused, and a hint of killing intent appeared on his originally kind and amiable face. "As long as I search your soul and turn you into a puppet, it won't affect the Fuxing sword's recognition of its master." Mo Tiange was still smiling and didn't even blink. Junior doesn't dare to say that Senior is wrong, but what Senior wants to know, even if you search my soul, it'll be useless. Master Taoist Yuanmu stared at her. Mo Tiange didn't say anything and looked calm. In the next moment, the expressions of several nascent soul cultivators suddenly changed. There was a strong fluctuation of divine sense in the air. Scholar Yu held his folding fan and frowned. This divine sense, with his cultivation level in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, it wasn't difficult for him to feel that this divine sense wasn't complete, but the hidden power of wind and thunder was something even he couldn't ignore. This divine sense appeared in a flash and then slowly disappeared into the sword on Mo Tiange's back. "Seniors, this is Junior's real bargaining chip." Mo Tiange cupped her hands at the crowd and said slowly. Maybe it was because her attitude was respectful, at least to save face for these nascent soul cultivators, or maybe it was because her bargaining chip was so amazing that they had to consider compromising. In the end, these nascent soul cultivators didn't say anything. Even the irascible cultivators who clamored to kill Mo Tiange were silent. Master Taoist Yuanmu looked to the side. Revered Wu Ming was still smiling with his eyes closed, seemingly not ready to express his opinion. Scholar Yu looked gloomy, but in the end, he sighed silently. Master Taoist Yuanmu withdrew his gaze and finally said, "Little fellow Taoist, what do you want? Please speak frankly." His voice was very calm, as if he had accepted this result. Fuyao Zi, the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong, was unrivaled for more than 100,000 years. His existence was already a legend. Even though he only had a trace of divine sense left, even though these people were already in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, they were still afraid of his prestige. Mo Tiange wasn't surprised by this result. She was just a nobody, but her master, Fuyao Zi, was a big shot. "Junior only wants what she deserves," she said calmly. "The share you deserve?" Immortal Yuanmu stared at her. "Little fellow Taoist, please speak clearly." Mo Tiange showed a faint smile and said with a modest expression, "In short, it's equal opportunities." But the next moment, blue veins appeared on Reverend Yuanmu's forehead. He took a deep breath and rubbed his forehead. After cultivating to the late stage of the nascent soul stage, his state of mind should have been calm and tranquil. However, today, he was repeatedly angered by a core formation cultivator. "What right do you have to have an equal opportunity?" The one who spoke was Scholar Yu. He stared coldly at Mo Tiange. "Even if you have Senior Fu Yao's divine sense protecting you, you're still just a core formation cultivator. Even if we agreed, would you dare to believe us?" As long as they found the immortal fate, they could casually wave their hands and this junior would be reduced to ashes. They were two completely different sides, yet they wanted to have an equal chance. With the Fuxing sword in Junior's hand, Mo Tiange said faintly. She didn't care about Scholar Yu's attitude at all. These late-stage nascent soul cultivators were used to being high and mighty. How could they tolerate others taking a share from their hands? Especially since she was just a core formation cultivator, in their eyes, she was just a little better than an ant. Little fellow Taoist. Master Taoist Yuan Mu stared at her with a profound gaze, but his tone was flat. I'll give you one more chance. If you obediently listen to me now, after we enter that mysterious space, I'll guarantee your safety and even accept you as my disciple. What do you think? Mo Tinga just smiled. Junior appreciates senior's good intentions. He took another step back, but was once again rejected. Enlightened Master Yuan Mu's expression darkened, and his voice deepened. Don't you think your appetite is too big? Mo Tinga said, 5 sacred objects, 1 for each of us. If Junior's appetite is really too big, what I want isn't an equal opportunity, but a 5th. After we enter that secret place, with Senior's abilities, you'll naturally obtain more things than Junior. Why do you want Junior to become a puppet and wait for Senior's alms? In the silence, Venerable Wu Ming finally spoke. Among the many nascent soul cultivators present, this late-stage nascent soul cultivator was the calmest. He still said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yuan Mu, Mr. Yu, why don't we let this little fellow Taoist rest first? This matter can't be rushed. Mo Tinga's trump card had been revealed, and she had also put forward her request. What was left was how they would deal with her, so it was useless to keep her here. Master Taoist Yuan Mu thought for a while. Seeing that no one had any objections, he said, Yunhe, take this little fellow Taoist to rest. He didn't say anything polite to Mo Tinga and didn't even glance at her. He was probably furious. Ling Yunhe answered respectfully, yes, martial uncle. Then he cupped his hands towards Mo Tinga. Qin. Oh, fellow Taoist Mo, please. Mo Tinga smiled and followed him out of the parlor. After walking with Ling Yunhe for a while, she finally heard him say, Fellow Taoist, you're really brave. You're not afraid at all in front of so many seniors. Mo Tinga just smiled. I have no other choice. Ling Yunhe was silent for a while, then suddenly said, Fellow Taoist Qin, do you not trust me? Mo Tinga was puzzled. What do you mean, fellow Taoist Ling? Ling Yunhe frowned and said, although I'm only a core formation cultivator, I can still guarantee fellow Taoist Qin's safety. Mo Tinga was stunned. After thinking about it, she realized he misunderstood. He thought she didn't trust his guarantee and wanted to deal with the nascent soul cultivators to fight for a chance of survival. She shook her head and said, Fellow Taoist Ling, you don't need to think too much. I wasn't trying to be fierce just now, and what I said wasn't false. Really? Seeing how calm she looked, Ling Yunhe couldn't help but believe her. Was that really Senior Fu Yaozi? Mo Tinga just smiled and didn't answer. Instead, she asked about something else. Fellow Taoist Ling, I heard Jillian Sec's sacred object is the soul restraining bead. Is it the soul restraining bead we saw in Carefree Valley that year? No, Ling Yunhe said. The soul restraining bead I had back then was an imitation refined by one of my Ling clan's ancestors based on the real soul restraining bead. However, its appearance and divine power are almost the same. Oh. No wonder Ling Yunhe could also obtain the soul restraining bead back then. It turned out it wasn't the real one. Then, is fellow Taoist Ling the person chosen by the real soul restraining bead as its master? When Ling Yunhe heard this, he stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. Mo Tinga smiled. I'm just guessing. If it's inconvenient, fellow Taoist Ling doesn't need to answer. Ling Yunhe turned back and continued to lead the way. Fellow Taoist Qin's guess is correct. The person chosen by the soul restraining bead is indeed me. Oh. Mo Tinga nodded. Then the people chosen by the inescapable net and nameless list are Jiawu and Han Shizhi? Ling Yunhe smiled. Correct. Otherwise, how could core formation cultivators like us participate in such a grand meeting? Mo Tinga furrowed her brows and thought to herself, the 3 of them, plus me, are all in the core formation realm. She suddenly had an idea. She used her divine sense to communicate with Fu Yaozi. Master, is there some secret behind this? Hee. Fu Yaozi's voice rang in her mind. The Fusheng sword recognizing you as its master was a coincidence, and it had little to do with your cultivation level. However, I think the reason why there are only 3 core formation cultivators is because the power of the key isn't enough. Huh? Didn't I already tell you? Their divine sense secret technique isn't as good as mine. Presumably, after being sealed for so many years, their divine senses have gradually faded. If the power of the chosen nascent soul cultivators isn't enough, they can only choose core formation cultivators. So, the other holy artifacts can choose whoever they want to recognize as their master? Then they can also change people at will? It's not that simple, Fu Yaozi said. Although the conditions for them to recognize a master aren't as strict as mine, they aren't that casual either. Moreover, because their divine sense secret technique isn't strong enough, their holy artifacts can only recognize a master once, so I'm certain they don't dare to take risks. Mo Tiange understood a little. In short, this master of hers was too scheming. Master, your Fusheng sword needs people with spiritual roots of the origin to recognize it as its master. Spiritual roots of the origin rarely appear in 1,000 years, and because the 4 of them aren't strong enough, they can only recognize a master once. Isn't it too difficult to gather 5 people who can be recognized by the holy artifacts at the same time? Fu Yaozi chuckled. Even if we can't gather all 5, so what? The reason I played these tricks was because I wanted to leave behind an inheritance for myself. Even if the mysterious space in the Sea of Returning Ruins never opens again, what does it have to do with us? Mo Tiange secretly wiped her sweat. In any case, he was only a wisp of divine sense now, and his true body had long advanced to the deification realm, so it really didn't have anything to do with him. As for the other 4 saints, she didn't know where they went. It was nothing more than leaving a fated chance for the younger generation. If they couldn't obtain it in the end, they probably wouldn't care. However, the living nascent soul cultivators certainly wouldn't care. In the living room, the nascent soul cultivators were silent, and all of them had ugly expressions on their faces. After a long time, Ling Shiyu asked, Senior Martial Brother Yuanmu, is there really no other way? Although Senior Fu Yaozi is the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong, he's still a person from 100,000 years ago, and now, he only has a bit of divine sense left. Master Daoist Yuanmu held his teacup and didn't move for a long time. At that moment, he sighed and said, how could it be that simple? Only now do I realize that Fu Yaozi is really much stronger than the founder. Someone was confused. What does Brother Daoist Yuanmu mean? His Fusheng sword is a holy artifact, but we also have holy artifacts in our hands. Can't we fight against him? Scholar Yu tapped the folding fan in his hand and said, our 3 groups have chosen to cooperate. Everyone present is the elite of our 3 groups. Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, fellow Daoist Avidya, why don't we speak frankly? Master Daoist Avidya nodded with a smile. Fellow Daoists, you can decide. This old monk has no objections. Master Daoist Yuanmu also nodded after thinking for a while. He put down his teacup and glanced at the nascent soul cultivators present. Since that's the case, I'll explain it clearly to everyone. He paused for a moment and said, you probably don't know this, but holy artifacts can only recognize a master once. After that, the divine sense on it will dissipate. Unless the new master also reaches the same cultivation level as senior 5 sages and seals the holy artifact again, the holy artifact will be no different from an ordinary magic treasure. Ah! Exclamations sounded in the guest hall. This was a secret of the 3 sects, and not all nascent soul cultivators knew about it. Someone shouted, Senior Martial Brother Yuanmu, so you're saying that we must find all 5 holy artifacts and make them recognize us as masters before the person who recognizes us dies? Master Daoist Yuanmu shook his head. Our holy artifacts haven't recognized us as masters yet. He frowned. I've discussed with fellow Daoist Yuanming and Mr. Yu before. Before we confirm that all the holy artifacts can recognize us as masters, we won't let them recognize us as masters. Otherwise, Once a holy artifact fails to recognize us as its master, the secret of the returning ruined sea will be sealed forever. Ling Xiyu came to his senses. So, this junior has already made the supporting life sword recognize us as its master, and we're unable to find another master for the supporting life sword? That's right. This is the reason why the three of us have our hands tied. Scholar Yu's expression was gloomy. If this junior didn't know this, how could she be so arrogant? Soul searching and making her into a puppet were just methods to scare her. After she was made into a puppet, they weren't sure if the holy artifacts would still be as effective as before. And they wouldn't even consider giving up on such a fortuitous encounter. Furthermore, we're now faced with another problem, revered Master Wu Ming said with a smile. We still can't be sure if the Heavenly Demon Tower has someone who can recognize us as its master. After a moment of silence, someone gritted his teeth. If the secret land of the returning ruined sea can never be opened because of this junior, I'll definitely crush her bones and scatter her ashes. Chapter 447. Fellow Daoist Qin, Ling Yunhe called from outside, we can go now. Mo Tiange stopped cultivating and came out of the virtual sky world. This Ling Yunhe already knew her real name, but he stubbornly called her fellow Daoist Qin, saying he was used to it and didn't want to change it. She shook her head, put away the restrictions in the room, and walked out of the door. Ling Yunhe was actually a good person. If it weren't for their positions, they could be friends, but it was unlikely for now. She made up her mind to return to the celestial pole as soon as this matter was over. Unless her strength increased greatly in the future, she would never set foot in Yunzhong again. After offending so many nascent soul cultivators, it was better to stay away from them. However, she didn't think she was greedy. What she wanted was nothing more than a chance to enter the mysterious space of the Sea of Returning Ruins to look for fated chances. As for these nascent soul cultivators, as long as she obediently played the role of a key, they might just kill her with a wave of their hands after she lost her usefulness. As for what Master Daoist Yuanmu said about accepting her as a disciple, not to mention that she had a master, even if she really entered Jiuyan sect, they wouldn't train her like they did with Ling Yunhe. They would most likely give her some random things to send her away. Besides, she had the virtual sky world, so how could ordinary treasures be rare? Fated chances were the only thing she wanted. Fated chances, it was this word that thoroughly offended these nascent soul cultivators. Fated chances weren't endless. She had the Fusheng sword, so her chances of getting fated chances were greater than others. If she got the key fated chances, others wouldn't. But why should she give up the chance she got? Although she didn't have enough cultivation level, unfortunately, she had the Fusheng sword that they didn't have. Fellow Daoist Ling, don't we have to wait anymore? Ling Yunhe said, there's news about the demonic tower, so there's no need to wait. The seniors have announced the time, so those nascent soul cultivators will naturally rush to the secret place before it opens. Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by, so she naturally didn't want to miss it. Following Ling Yunhe, she met those nascent soul cultivators again. After a few days, these nascent soul cultivators had calmed down. Their gazes towards her were no longer angry, but very cold. Seeing her coming, Master Daoist Yuanmu said, okay, let's go. The other cultivators responded one after another, each using their own means and stepping on their flying treasures. Ling Yunhe, Han Shizhi, and Zhu Wu were brought along by their respective masters. Seeing as no one was paying attention to her, Mo Tiange also waved her sleeves. A cloud appeared under her feet as she activated her cloud-treading boots. All the nascent soul cultivators rose into the sky, turned into rays of light, and flew far away. One Leaf Island was just a small island. Almost all the cultivators were alarmed by the commotion. Most of the cultivators above the nascent soul realm had already received the news and left a long time ago. As for the core formation cultivators, they were both envious and jealous. Only a few of the bolder ones looked in the direction the light disappeared in and quietly followed it. Unfortunately, their efforts were futile. With the speed of a nascent soul cultivator, how could they keep up? Right now, Mo Tienga was using her cloud-treading boots with all her strength. She even took out the land-shrinking ruler to increase her speed. However, it was still too difficult to keep up with these nascent soul cultivators. If it weren't for the fact that they hadn't used their full strength, she would have been left behind long ago. Mo Tienga smiled bitterly in her heart. Why were these nascent soul cultivators so narrow-minded? They'd obviously agreed to her conditions, but they still had to watch her embarrass herself. In fact, these nascent soul cultivators were secretly surprised to see her barely keeping up with the group. Some of them even thought that since this female cultivator dared to discuss conditions with them, nascent soul cultivators, she really had some skills. They also remembered that her cultivation level was already in the peak stage of the core formation realm. As long as she had a fated chance, she could enter the nascent soul realm. At that time, she would be on the same level as them. With that in mind, those early-stage nascent soul cultivators no longer looked down on her. Mo Tienga had a hard time keeping up with them. The result of using all her strength was that her spiritual aura was draining too fast. She had no choice but to keep a high-grade restorative panacea in her mouth at all times. Despite that, she was still slowly being left behind. After flying for a while, Revered Avidya suddenly said, "Little fellow Taoist, let this old monk lend you a hand." As he said that, he waved his kasaya. A strong aura suddenly approached Mo Tienga and swept her over. In an instant, she was standing on Revered Avidya's lotus throne. Mo Tienga heaved a sigh of relief, then cupped her hands to express her gratitude. "Thank you for your help, Senior." Revered Avidya smiled and said no more. He continued to fly forward on his lotus throne. Among these nascent soul cultivators, Revered Avidya treated her quite well. More than 10 years ago, when he asked her to return the inescapable net, he didn't make things difficult for her. This time, when other cultivators made things difficult for her, he once again extended a helping hand. She secretly rejoiced that she returned the inescapable net so straightforwardly. It was probably because of this that this Revered Avidya had a slight favorable impression of her. "Benefactor Mo, are you all right?" A voice entered her ears. Mo Tienga turned around and saw that it was Ju Wu, who was also standing behind Revered Avidya. This Ju Wu was tall, had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and looked very sturdy. However, he also looked honest and sincere. Right now, he turned his head to ask her. His expression was full of concern and didn't seem fake. Mo Tienga wiped the sweat on her forehead, then answered with a smile, "Thank you for your concern, fellow Taoist. I'm just a little tired." Ju Wu also smiled at her but still put his palms together and obediently stood behind Revered Avidya. A hint of confusion flashed in Mo Tienga's eyes. Back then, when she met Ju Wu in Sky Snow City, he was driven out. He was very down and out, and he even robbed other cultivators with his junior martial brother. Although he kept some commandments in mind, what he did was really a bit. Moreover, when she killed his junior martial brother out of anger, he was very sad. Why didn't he blame her at all and even cared about her now? Sensing her gaze from time to time, Ju Wu turned around and smiled at her. "Benefactor Mo, is there something wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Since she was discovered, Mo Tienga bluntly said, "Fellow Taoist Ju Wu, please don't blame me. I just feel that you're very different from when we first met, so, I see." Ju Wu still had a humble smile on his face as he said, "What happened back then was because of this poor monk's mistake. Ever since I was brought back to Mount Baifu by senior martial brother Ju Xian, this poor monk has cut off all ties with the past." "Is that so? Could it be that he doesn't even care about killing his junior martial brother?" "Little fellow Taoist," Revered Avidya suddenly said, "Ju Wu cultivates Zen." Mo Tienga was stunned. "He cultivates Zen? What does that mean?" But Ju Wu just smiled at her. He still stood there with his head lowered and didn't say anything. In the next few days, everyone focused on hurrying on their journey. During this journey, Mo Tienga saw numerous sea beasts in the Sea of Returning Ruins. Their numbers ranged from the 5th rank to the 7th rank. There were even some 8th rank sea beasts once in a while. Fortunately, with so many nascent soul cultivators here, those sea beasts sensed their powerful momentum and flew far away before they could get close. Their journey was almost smooth sailing, and they soon arrived at their destination. Several days later, the group of nascent soul cultivators stopped in the sky above an isolated island in the sea. Looking at the island surrounded by clouds and mist under their feet, someone asked doubtfully, "Senior Martial Brother Yuanmu, is this the place?" Mo Tiange also had doubts in her heart. The island under their feet was a bit bigger than One Leaf Island, but it was bare and looked like a stone mountain without the slightest bit of spiritual aura. Of course. Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't explain and directly landed on the island. The others also followed him and landed one after another. There were already other cultivators waiting on the island. When they saw the cultivators from the 3 groups, they hurriedly went up to greet them. Mo Tiange glanced at them. Most of these cultivators were in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. They didn't look like they were from any big forces, so they could basically be regarded as extras. The biggest benefits would naturally be divided among the few biggest forces. As for these people, it would depend on their own fated chances. Mo Tiange thanked Venerable Avidya, then casually found a quiet corner and sat down cross-legged. In the following day, more and more nascent soul cultivators arrived, and their cultivation levels were also getting higher and higher. Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, fellow Daoist Avidya, Mr. Yu, you 3 came really early. Sensing another powerful spiritual aura approaching, Mo Tiange opened her eyes and saw another late-stage nascent soul cultivator descending with several disciples. This late-stage nascent soul cultivator looked like a skinny old man. He wore a tattered Daoist robe and held a horsetail whisk, but his voice was full of energy. "So it's fellow Daoist Gua." Master Daoist Yuanmu greeted him with a smile. "This is Daoist Gua from Pufa School." Ling Yunhe came to her side and said softly, "Daoist Gua looks unremarkable, but his diamond body refining technique is very good. There are very few people in Yinzhong who can break his body protecting technique." Mo Tiange nodded, indicating she understood. She then turned to Ling Yunhe and smiled. "Thank you for telling me, fellow Daoist Ling, you're still hanging out with me. Aren't you afraid of the sex elders getting angry?" Ling Yunhe laughed. "Martial uncles and martial uncles don't care about this. They don't like fellow Daoist Qin because you show off too much and don't give them any face." "Oh," Mo Tiange answered softly. It turned out her attitude was too tough, which made these nascent soul seniors unhappy. Speaking of which, these nascent soul seniors were really narrow-minded. "Fellow Daoist Qin, we've known each other for many years, so I have to remind you. Although you have the Fuxing sword and Senior Fu Yaozi's help, you still have to be careful on this trip. After all, there are too many nascent soul seniors who came this time, and many of them are hot-tempered. Fellow Daoist Qin, you'd better restrain yourself." Hearing Ling Yunhe's advice, Mo Tiange smiled and thanked him sincerely. "Thank you, fellow Daoist Ling. I understand." Seeing that she listened to his advice, Ling Yunhe smiled and seemed to be relieved. "By the way, fellow Daoist Ling, did the master of the Heavenly Devil Tower also find a master?" Ling Yunhe nodded. "Yes. If not, how could he let us make the sacred objects recognize him as master?" Mo Tiange thought about it and agreed. They were the ones who paid the most attention to the mysterious space in the Sea of Returning Ruins. Since they came here, they must have confirmed that the 5 sacred objects recognized them as masters and could open the space. Who got the Heavenly Devil Tower? This question made Ling Yunhe hesitate for a moment. In the end, he said, "Fellow Daoist Qin will know soon." Chapter 448. Fellow Taoists, you're early. Another late-stage nascent realm cultivator arrived. Before he landed, he already greeted everyone with a loud voice. Mo Tiange looked up. This person had a bald head, a ring scar, a fat head, big ears, and a ferocious face. Even though he was wearing a kasaya, he still looked like a ruffian. "This is Taolin Temple's venerable Shuxiang," Ling Yunhe explained to her. "He cultivates the tiger taming technique, which is different from venerable Avidya's." "Oh." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. She knew that there was more than one Buddhist sect. Judging from Reverend Nameless' actions, he should be from a relatively gentle and disciplined sect. This Reverend Void aspect, on the other hand, was much more laid back. This venerable Shuxiang has a strong momentum. His tiger taming technique should be famous for its tyranny, right? "Yes," Ling Yunhe praised. Ling Yunhe praised, "If Daoist Gua is the hardest tortoise shell, then venerable Shuxiang is the sharpest stone." Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh at this comparison. The next moment, she noticed the late-stage nascent realm cultivators were looking at them, so she quickly stopped laughing. Venerable Shuxiang scratched his head and asked, "Old Yuanmu, is this a disciple of your sect?" Master Yuanmu cast him a sidelong glance and said stiffly, "Why do you care? I know this boy. He's from the Ling clan. The one next to him isn't wearing Juyan sect's clothes. Is she his wife?" Mo Tiange didn't care, but Ling Yunhe said hurriedly, "Senior Shuxiang, please don't misunderstand. This is fellow Daoist Mo, the person Fuxing's sword recognized as its master." "Oh." Venerable Shuxiang was surprised and laughed. "Little girl, you're not bad." Mo Tiange could only smile and clasp her hands towards Venerable Shuxiang to show her respect. Venerable Shuxiang waved at her and turned back to continue talking with the late-stage nascent realm cultivators. After a while, a strong devil aura fluctuation came from the sky. Mo Tiange was shocked when she looked up. This person was obviously a devil cultivator. Judging from his momentum, he was probably a late-stage nascent realm cultivator. This person was covered in a cloak and looked like a devil cultivator. Behind him were two tall refined corpses. They were both in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. "This is Yuing City Lord, Yuing Demon Lord," Ling Yunhe said. "Among the three great demon monarchs of the diabolism, Demon Monarch Yuing is the most mysterious. No one has ever seen what he looks like, and the two refined corpses beside him are also famous. Ordinary nascent soul cultivators are no match for them. In terms of strength, even our sect's Uncle Master Yuanmu might not be able to defeat him. Late nascent soul cultivation level, and two refined corpses in the early stage of the nascent soul realm." Mo Tiange said with a sigh, "Aren't they three people in one?" Ling Yunhe smiled. "Isn't that so? However, refined corpses are also very difficult to refine. It's not much easier than feeding spirit beasts. Being able to cultivate a refined corpse to the nascent soul stage is also a form of strength. It has been many years since we last met. Fellow Yu Ying's cultivation has improved again." Seeing Yuing City Lord, Venerable Su Xiang said in a strange tone. It was a pity that Moon Shadow City Lord ignored him and merely greeted perfected Yuanmu and the rest. After another half a day, many cultivators came to the small island one after another, but the late-stage nascent soul cultivators were nowhere to be seen. Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Ling, there are more cultivators in the late stage of Yunzhong, right?" Ling Yunhe pondered for a while and said, "There are still 4 people who haven't arrived. They should arrive before the space opens." "Oh, which 4? 2 of them are naturally the other 2 demon monarchs," Ling Yunhe said. "The 3 demon monarchs are all in the late stage. Only Yuing City Lord is here. There's also progenitor Miaoying from Jingshu School. She seems to have some matters to deal with, and she even sent a letter to my uncle Master Yuanmu. The last one is an individual cultivator. There are 2 other demon monarchs." Mo Tiange frowned. "Is the heavenly devil tower with one of them?" As she spoke, a strong wave of devil aura came from the sky again. It was even stronger than when Yuing arrived. Mo Tiange looked up. Sure enough, a group of devil cultivators had arrived, and among them were 2 in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Guifang Demon Monarch, Night Frost Demon Monarch, they actually came together. Ling Yunhe murmured. Mo Tiange knew Guifang Demon Monarch, and Night Frost Demon Monarch was actually a very young woman with a cold face. Although her face was as cold as frost, she was as beautiful as a peach. She wore a dark purple robe that wrapped tightly around her body, giving her a different kind of charm. Mo Tiange was secretly surprised. She knew Night Frost Demon Monarch was the Lord of Night Owl City. Among the 3 devil domains of the Devil Path, Night Owl City was the most overbearing and ruthless one. Any cultivator who offended Night Owl City would be avenged. For example, in Starfall City, the Lord's mansion was slaughtered in one night, and no one survived except for Lord Mei. She really didn't expect that the lord of such an overbearing Night Owl City was actually a woman. Then, her gaze was attracted by a person in the queue. Yang Qingji. His cultivation level was still in the middle stage of the core formation realm, but he was in the middle of a group of nascent soul cultivators, following Guifang Demon Monarch closely. Could it be him? Among the core formation cultivators present, there were only Zhu Wu, Han Shiji, Ling Yunhe, and her. The 4 of them were all people who had been recognized by the holy objects. During this period of time, only nascent soul cultivators came. There were no core formation cultivators, but Yang Qingji was clearly only a core formation cultivator, yet he was in the queue. Fellow Taoist Guifang, fellow Taoist Night Frost, you 2 finally came. Master Taoist Yuanmu and the others went to greet them. That Night Frost Demon Monarch only cupped his hands at everyone and didn't even say a word. He just stood to the side with a cold expression. The others obviously knew this Night Frost Demon Monarch's personality, so they didn't care. Master Taoist Yuanmu still said to Guifang Demon Monarch enthusiastically, fellow Taoist Guifang finally came. Did everything go smoothly? Guifang Demon Monarch nodded expressionlessly and answered, fellow Taoist Yuanmu doesn't need to worry. On the side, Scholar Yu smiled and said, fellow Taoist Guifang really hit it well. If we hadn't gathered the other 4 holy objects, no one would have known Heavenly Devil Tower had actually fallen into fellow Taoist Guifang's hands. Isn't that so? Once Scholar Yu finished speaking, Venerable Xuxiang immediately let out a strange cry. Back then, fellow Taoist Guifang really deceived us miserably in returning ruined sea. He even said it was because of our Buddhist school that fellow Taoist lost Heavenly Devil Tower. As it turns out, fellow Taoist was just bluffing. The sarcasm in Venerable Xuxiang's words was very strong. When Guifang Demon Monarch heard what he said, the muscles on his face twitched, but he only let out a humph and didn't argue with him. Hearing up to this point, Mo Tiange was already certain that the person Heavenly Devil Tower recognized as its master was Yang Qingji. This Guifang Demon Monarch was really scheming. Back then, he became enemies with Buddhist school because of the Heavenly Devil Tower. When Venerable Avidya went to Guifang City, he even acted like he wouldn't stop until one of them died, but in the end, he secretly took Heavenly Devil Tower for himself. Others only knew he hated Buddhist school to the extreme, but they didn't know that was just a smokescreen. Her gaze once again fell on Yang Qingji. At that moment, Yang Qingji also noticed her. After a moment of hesitation, he raised his hand towards her. Mo Tiange smiled and returned his salute. What a coincidence. She actually knew all the people the other holy objects recognized as their masters. She and Ling Yunhe had some friendship, and Yang Qingji could be considered an old acquaintance. As for Jiehe, she still couldn't tell whether he really didn't hold a grudge or not, but Han Shiji clearly had a grudge against her. Although Ling Yunhe promised to mediate for her in the past, there were old grudges between them. If there was a conflict of interest, Han Shiji would definitely harm her. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. She really had to be careful in this matter. Even if she had the Fuxing sword and those people didn't dare to do anything to her, she was still at a disadvantage. If only her master and senior martial brother were here. Just as she was thinking, another person flew towards the island. This person's cultivation level was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, but the aura around his body was extremely strong. Mo Tiange even thought her senses were wrong. However, this person's aura clearly lacked something. It couldn't compare to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. As this person flew closer and closer and landed on the island, Mo Tiange's expression suddenly changed. This person was shrouded in black clouds. Whether it was the appearance or the aura of the black clouds, they reminded her of one person, Master Song Feng. This person naturally couldn't be Master Song Feng, but his appearance was exactly the same as Master Song Feng's. If this person wasn't a male cultivator, Mo Tiange almost guessed it was Nie Wushang. Primordial devil aura, she said in a low voice. This person cultivated primordial devil aura. Could it be that there was a sacrificial temple in the clouds? It's you. Before Mo Tiange could figure out what was going on, the cold-faced woman, Devil Monarch Yi Shuang, already spoke. She stared coldly at the new devil cultivator, waved her sleeve, and the ribbon on her purple robe fluttered. All of a sudden, her aura was astonishing. Mei Feng, how dare you? You escaped from me back then, and now you still dare to bump into me today. Mei Feng? Mo Tiange was taken aback. It was actually Castellan Mei of Starfall City back then? He escaped with his life, and in the past few decades, he actually advanced to the middle stage. The sharp voice of a teenager came from the black clouds. Castellan Yi, why are you so ruthless? Back then, I accidentally offended your disciple, and you've already completely destroyed the foundation of my Starfall City. All these years, I haven't caused trouble for your Nighthawk City, so this matter can be considered even, right? Easy for you to say. Devil Monarch Yi Shuang said coldly, your small Starfall City is also worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as my disciple? Take your life to make amends first. Right after he finished speaking, his devil aura suddenly rose and heavily pressed down. The early-stage nascent soul cultivators on the island with slightly lower cultivation levels were shaken, while the 5 core formation cultivators, including Mo Tiange, couldn't help but sway. Seeing this, revered Wu Ming flicked his kasaya, and an invisible aura protected the juniors. He put his palms together and said, Amitba. Fellow Daoist Yi Shuang, if you want to have a private fight, please don't hurt the innocent. Devil Monarch Yi Shuang swept his gaze over and withdrew his devil aura, but his eyes were still fixed on Mei Feng. Mei Feng laughed and said, Castellan Yi, although you're stronger than me, I'm no longer the Mei Feng of the past. It won't be easy to capture me. Today, we both came for the fated chance of the 5 saints of the returning ruined sea. Compared to the soul formation realm, this little grudge is nothing. If we can't reconcile, let's fight after we come out, okay? Devil Monarch Yi Shuang stared at him coldly for a while, then snorted and waved his sleeve. The purple satin belt was still wrapped around her body, but he looked away, no longer looking at him. The crisis was over. Mei Feng landed on the island, and the primordial devil aura on him faded a little. Although he was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, there were 8 or 9 late-stage cultivators on the island, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Moreover, he didn't have many friends in the past, so he just wanted to find a quiet place to stay low-key and wait. However, when he turned around, he saw Mo Tiange sitting cross-legged in the corner. It's you. He was shocked and angry. Mo Tiange sighed helplessly. Castellan Mei, long time no see. Mei Feng gnashed his teeth and looked at her. Old and new grudges surged up. The primordial devil he painstakingly cultivated was swallowed by someone else, the Starfall City he painstakingly built for many years was destroyed, and he fled in panic like a stray dog. He didn't really hate Devil Monarch Yi Shuang because she was strong and he accidentally offended her. However, he hated Mo Tiange to the bone. If it weren't for this junior, his primordial devil wouldn't have been eaten by someone else. If it weren't for his failure on the verge of success, his Starfall City wouldn't have been exterminated. If it weren't for offending Devil Monarch Yi Shuang, he wouldn't have had to hide for dozens of years. His actions were faster than his thoughts. He raised his arm and a gust of primordial devil aura shot towards Mo Tiange. Chapter 449. The nascent soul cultivators didn't expect that Mei Feng would suddenly attack Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange chose a relatively remote corner with only Ling Yunhe by her side. In the blink of an eye, the primordial devil aura had reached Mo Tiange's face. Whoosh! Mo Tiange opened the heaven and earth fan and blocked in front of her. At the same time, the art of primordial devil aura and the white silk handkerchief turned into mist and surrounded her body. Even so, Mo Tiange was still sent flying in the next moment. Fortunately, after several years of training by Fu Yaozi, her strength had increased greatly, so she could withstand the hasty attack of a nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, almost all of her magic treasures had the effect of restraining devil qi, so even though she was repelled, she didn't suffer too serious injuries. Mei Feng immediately chased after her aggressively. *tch, I'll grind your bones and scatter your ashes to vent my hatred. Fellow Daoist Mei. Master Daoist Yuanmu shouted but didn't stop her. He saw Mo Tiange's means just now. This junior was indeed skilled. At least, she could resist for a few breaths. He had been angered by Mo Tiange several times before, so he decided to save her after she suffered a bit. With his cultivation level, he could save her before she died. Mo Tiange didn't have much time to think. She tiptoed and soared into the air. Light flashed in her hands and several high-level talismans were slapped on her body without hesitation. Finally, she opened the lotus umbrella to block the remaining devil aura. Mei Feng was furious to see her escape from his hands. He snorted coldly and clenched his hands. More and more primordial devil aura gathered between his palms and became as black as ink. When the primordial devil aura finished gathering in his hands, Mei Feng grinned, turned his wrist, and pushed the mass of primordial devil aura out. The mass of primordial devil aura whistled through the air. Mo Tiange's expression suddenly changed. If she was hit by this mass of primordial devil aura, even if she didn't lose her life, she would at least lose half of it. She couldn't help but feel annoyed. These nascent soul cultivators clearly knew she had the key. If they didn't save her now, when would they? Although she hated these people, she did not wait for death. She pressed her wrist and a golden light shot out from her arm, pouring into the lotus umbrella. The umbrella suddenly lit up, and at the same time, she quickly fell down. You want to escape like this? Mei Feng sneered and waved his sleeve. Primordial devil aura immediately chased after her. The intermediate stage of the original level. Even though she has been under Fu Yaozi's guidance for many years and her capabilities have greatly increased and her cultivation level has reached the peak of the original level, this was still a gap she could not make up for. Sensing that the mass of primordial devil aura was getting closer and closer, Mo Tiange secretly clenched her teeth. She could only hold the lotus elemental umbrella tightly and use the heaven and earth fan in front of her to block it. If these old farts didn't attack, they wouldn't be able to open it. Amitabha. A chant of Buddha's name resounded like a huge bell. Mo Tiange felt a warm sensation on her body as a golden light enveloped her. At the same time, she heard the clear sound of a sharp weapon, and a figure swept over like lightning, blocking in front of her. Boom! The approaching mass of prime devil qi collided with a beam of red light. In an instant, the spiritual energy on the island surged and the weather changed. When the light dissipated, Mo Dong Mountain was stunned. She stood there in a daze, letting the wind caused by the fierce aura fluctuations tear her around. She loosened her grip and the lotus umbrella fell. You. After a long time, she found her voice and grabbed the sleeve of the person in front of her. The next moment, she hurriedly rubbed her eyes. I'm not seeing things, right? Qin, she sighed and pulled her hand away. You said you could take care of yourself. You've been gone for more than 50 years without any news. As soon as I saw you, you were fighting with your life. How did you take care of yourself? His voice carried a hint of complaint, but it was also full of concern. After confirming the person in front of her wasn't an illusion, Mo Tiange grabbed his hand and looked around. She wanted to say something, but after a long time, she only said, you. How did you become like this? She knew the pure yang technique could also preserve one's appearance. For so many years, his appearance had been maintained at the age of 23 or 24. Although the person in front of her wasn't old, he was obviously a few years older. There was even white hair on his head. What the hell happened? Seeing her appearance made Qin Shi laugh. He gently patted her head and said, "I'll tell you later." Mo Tiange regained her composure. She thought about the situation in front of her, took a deep breath, and suppressed her excitement. Although she was full of questions, didn't understand why he suddenly appeared here, didn't know how he found her, and didn't know what happened to him, she was sure he was real. These things could be asked in detail later. Fellow Taoist. Upon seeing Qin Shi, Master Taoist Yuanmu narrowed his eyes and looked up at progenitor Miaoying, full of questions. Progenitor Miaoying was a dignified Taoist nun in her 30s. She wore a plain Taoist robe and held a horsetail whisk in her hand. She always had a smile on her face, looking very friendly and kind. Fellow Taoist Yuanmu, fellow Taoists, I'm late. Please forgive me. She slightly lowered her head and saluted everyone. Junior Marshal Sister Miaoying, there's no need to be so polite between us. Master Taoist Yuanmu greeted her with a smile. It's not time yet, so I'm not late. The others also greeted her one after another. Even Venerable Xuxiang, who had a bad temper, smiled at her. It could be seen that this progenitor Miaoying was very popular. When they finished greeting each other, Master Taoist Yuanmu asked, Junior Marshal Sister Miaoying, is this fellow Taoist your friend? Seeing his vigilant gaze, progenitor Miaoying smiled and said, yes, I met this fellow Taoist Qin not long ago and we had a pleasant conversation. Fellow Taoist Qin happened to come to the Sea of Returning Ruins to look for someone, so I invited him to come with me. As she spoke, she winked and sent a voice transmission, fellow Taoist Yuanmu. Although this fellow Taoist Qin is only in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, his strength can't be underestimated. I'm afraid he's not weaker than late-stage cultivators like us. Upon hearing this, Master Taoist Yuanmu looked at Qin Shi with something else in his eyes. He also asked via voice transmission, Junior Marshal Sister, do you know this person's background? Is this the person he's looking for? Master Taoist Yuanmu's reaction confused Miaoying, so she replied, it seems so. This fellow Taoist Qin is said to be from the outer endless sea. A celestial pole cultivator? Progenitor Miaoying paused for a moment before nodding. Probably. At that moment, Qin Shi was confronting Mei Feng. Mei Feng stood there vigilantly, staring coldly at Qin Shi. Just now, when his massive primordial devil aura was about to hit her, Revered Avidya acted and used his golden bell shield to protect her. However, this new middle-stage nascent soul cultivator suddenly appeared and blocked his massive primordial devil aura for her. This surprised Mei Feng and made him vigilant. He was surprised that there were actually two nascent soul cultivators who stood up for this stinky girl. Could it be that there was some kind of relationship between them? He was vigilant because in the past 50 years, he had been hiding and painstakingly cultivating only to reach the middle stage of the primordial devil art. He believed his primordial devil aura couldn't be resisted by cultivators in the same realm as him. However, this new cultivator, who was clearly in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm like him, was able to scatter his massive primordial devil aura with just a magic weapon. He had never seen this cultivator before. Who are you, Your Excellency? Mei Feng said in a deep voice. Let me give you a piece of advice. This woman and I have an irreconcilable hatred. Your Excellency, it's better if you don't intervene. Qin Shi curled his lips into a contemptuous smile. What if I insist on intervening? Mei Feng's expression darkened and he said gloomily, then I'll have to compare notes with you. Ha! Qin Shi waved his sleeves. The three-yang real fire sword circled above his head. He sneered and said, why would I need to compare notes? It's better to fight with my life. Mei Feng's expression suddenly changed. If he still couldn't see the relationship between this cultivator and that bitch, he would be blind. However, this person's attitude made him unhappy and puzzled. An unknown cultivator actually dared to threaten him. The mysterious space was about to open, but this person was so reckless and wanted to fight with him with his life for a woman. Fellow Taoist Mei. Master Taoist Yuanmu called out. He looked at Mei Feng and said faintly, I advise you to stop. Fellow Taoist Yuanmu. Mei Feng was stunned when he heard Master Taoist Yuanmu's words. Then he said, she's just a core formation junior and not a disciple of Juyan sect. Why are you protecting her? Master Taoist Yuanmu's expression was calm but inadvertently cold. He was the top cultivator in Yunzhong and also the head Grand Supreme Elder of Juyan sect. He was someone who could shake the cultivation world in Yunzhong with a stomp of his foot. Mei Feng was just an ordinary early-stage nascent soul devil cultivator before. Even though he had advanced to the middle stage now and his strength was quite extraordinary, he still didn't care about him. Fellow Taoist Mei, didn't you ask clearly before you did something? This little friend Mo is the person the Fusheng sword has recognized as its master. If you kill her, not only will we all come here in vain, but the mysterious space in Sea of Returning Ruins will never appear again. When Mei Feng heard this, he was shocked. What? Fellow Taoist Yuanmu is right. Revered Avidya smiled and said, therefore, fellow Taoist Mei, we absolutely won't watch you kill this little friend. Mei Feng had to believe what the two late-stage nascent soul cultivators said. His expression kept changing. One moment, he glared fiercely at her, the next moment, he looked hesitant. In the end, he clenched his teeth and snorted coldly. That being the case, I'll let you live for a while longer. Master Taoist Yuanmu and revered Avidya were very satisfied with what Mei Feng said. Compared to the mysterious space in Sea of Returning Ruins, what was a small core formation cultivator? No matter how big their hatred was, it couldn't compare to a fated chance in the deification realm. Unfortunately, they weren't satisfied for long. Qin, she said coldly, Your Excellency, do you want to retreat unscathed? Mei Feng was stunned, then anger appeared on his face. I don't care anymore, so what else do you want? You're just a core formation female cultivator. Do you really want to fight me to the death? Humph. Qin, she stared at him and said coldly, Unfortunately, the core formation female cultivator you mentioned is my Dao companion. You want to take my Dao companion's life, yet you still ask me what I want? Chapter 450. As soon as Qin she said that, the scene became quiet. Mei Feng was startled. Master Taoist Yuanmu, Venerable Wu Ming, and the others looked at each other but didn't say anything. The meaning of the word Dao companion to cultivators was thought-provoking. The so-called Dao companion was a companion who sought immortality and Dao, which was also what cultivators called husband and wife. In this cultivation world, any relationship was unreliable, but Dao companions were undoubtedly the closest kind of relationship. This was because generally speaking, Dao companions were the only kind of relationship that one had decided on. Blood ties couldn't be chosen, and master-disciple relationships were often full of benefits. As for Dao companions, although there were also those who united because of benefits, the possibility was much lower than others. For most people, Dao companions were the companions they chose on the path to immortality. Cultivators were usually very vigilant. Since they had decided on a companion, it was relatively speaking, the person they trusted the most. Over a long period of time, when two people accompanied each other, their feelings were usually the deepest. From this point of view, hurting someone's Dao companion was no different from hurting the person themselves. Therefore, when Master Taoist Yuanmu and the others heard Qin Shi's words, they didn't plan to stop him. A middle-stage nascent soul cultivator wouldn't have any face if his Dao companion was chased by others and he didn't care. Besides, as long as the little girl recognized by the Fusheng sword was fine, what did it matter if others killed her? There was still one less person to fight for the fated chance. However, they originally thought that although this core formation junior was likely to be a disciple of a large sect or clan in the outer Endless Sea, she had no foundation in Yunzhong and didn't need to worry at all. But now, her Tao companion was also in Yunzhong, and this person was actually in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Master Daoist Yuanmu couldn't help but look at Miaoying progenitor. Just now, Miaoying progenitor said that although this fellow Daoist Qin was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, his methods and divine abilities were very extraordinary and probably not weaker than late-stage cultivators like them. In that case, this person had to be taken seriously. Scholar Yu obviously had the same concerns. He looked at Qin Shi, then turned to Master Daoist Yuanmu and whispered, "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, this situation." Master Daoist Yuanmu sighed slightly and also replied, "What do you think, Mr. Yu?" Although this Scholar Yu was not as good at using money and power, he was wise and resourceful. His thoughts often went straight to the point. It was thanks to his idea that the three sects had joined hands to search for the ruins of the 5 saints. Scholar Yu said, "As long as our 3 sects are united, fellow Daoist Miao Ying, fellow Daoist Gua, and the others will definitely stand on our side. As for a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator, we don't need to worry too much, but if that's the case, we won't be able to control this junior." Scholar Yu sighed and nodded. After a moment's thought, he added, "In truth, we can already tell from what happened on One Leaf Island that this junior isn't someone who is willing to be controlled. He dares to negotiate with our 3 sects on his own. She has Senior Fu Yaozi's guidance, so I'm afraid she has already prepared an escape route. We might not be able to do anything to her." What Mr. Yu said makes sense. Immortal Yuanmu pondered for a moment. "Since that's the case, we'll let her be. As long as she obediently opens the space and doesn't cause us any trouble." The others did not know about the secret voice transmission between Immortal Yuanmu and Scholar Yu, but they all saw their attitude of staying out of the matter. In fact, the other cultivators were eager for the two to fight. Many of them had grievances among the nascent soul cultivators, but they were worried that the space was about to open and the fortuitous opportunity was rare, so they tacitly did not bring up old grievances. If the two of them fought, the 2 mid-stage nascent soul cultivators would most likely end up with both sides suffering. When that time came, they would have 2 less formidable opponents after entering the space. Mei Feng was also aware of this. All these years, he had hidden himself to cultivate the Great Prime Demon technique, not daring to appear in front of others at all, because he had previously offended the Night Owl City Lord, Demon Lord Nightfrost. However, when news of the secret land of the returning ruined sea came, he could no longer sit still. So what if he offended the Night Frost Demon Lord? If the Night Frost Demon Lord really wanted to take him down before the space opened, he would also lose his strength. When that time came, he would be suppressed by the other late-stage nascent soul cultivators when he entered the secret land. As for what would happen after it ended, who knew what would happen? Perhaps he had obtained a great fortuitous opportunity, or perhaps he would perish inside. The Night Frost Demon Lord was the same. That was why he dared to swagger over directly. However, this mid-stage nascent soul cultivator in front of him did not seem to think so. Mei Feng was very puzzled. Which cultivator in Yunzhong would be willing to miss the secret land of the returning ruined sea? It was related to the legend of the 5 saints' soul formation. Moreover, looking at this person's cultivation level and magical powers, he should have heard of it long ago, but he had never heard of it. Could it be that this person's cultivation level had improved greatly in the more than 50 years he had been hiding in seclusion? Or could it be that the other party was not a cultivator in Yunzhong at all? Thinking of this, Mei Feng sneered in his heart. Whether it was Shaoyang or Yuanzhou, the level of cultivation was lower than that of Yunzhong. If he was a cultivator from these 2 places, then it was very likely that this person was fierce in appearance but weak in heart. If this person was a cultivator from Yunzhong who had just advanced to the mid-stage, then it would be even easier. He was very confident in his Great Prime Demon technique, and cultivators of the same level who had just advanced were no match for him. "Fellow Daoist, how should I address you? Which large sect are you from?" Mei Feng asked. He was only worried about one thing. If this person was a newly promoted Grand Supreme Elder of a large sect, then he would have to consider the force behind him. "Qin," she said faintly, "my surname is Qin, and my Taoist name is Shoujing. As for my sect, you don't need to worry about it. If you have the ability to kill me, even if someone comes to take revenge, they'll be thousands of miles away." Hearing this, Mei Feng's eyes shone with an ominous glint, but he still said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist Qin, if you weren't a cultivator from Yunzhong, you might not understand the significance of the Five Saints' secret land of the returning Ruined Sea. There are fated chances to soul formation in there." Qin, she smiled. "You don't dare?" Mei Feng looked angry. He just felt it was a waste of this opportunity. Since this person was so unreasonable, he could only consume some of his strength to kill him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be troublesome if he was plotted against again after entering the secret land? Thinking up to this point, Mei Feng shook his sleeves, and primordial devil aura rose. He said coldly, "In that case, fellow Taoist Qin, please." Mei Feng's thoughts coincided with Qin Shi's. When he found traces of Tiange in Cloud Wing City, he originally planned to look for her immediately. Progenitor Miaoying asked him about his plan and did him a favor by asking the disciples of Jingshu's sect to help him find out the whereabouts of Yi Shaotian. Later, the disciples of Jingshu's sect reported that Yi Shaotian was heading north, possibly to the returning Ruined Sea via Nanzhou. Progenitor Miaoying then invited him to go with her. Qin Shi originally planned to refuse, but unexpectedly, he learned from Progenitor Miaoying that this matter was related to Qin Wei. The three major sects wanted to gather the 5 holy relics to open the mysterious space in the returning Ruined Sea, and Qin Wei had one of the holy relics, the Fusheng sword. After connecting the two incidents, Qin Shi was able to guess what happened. He was the only one who knew that Yi Shaotian and Qin Wei were the same person. Yi Shaotian heading to Sea of Returning Ruins was definitely related to this matter. And Progenitor Miaoying was invited by the 3 major sects to go to the returning Ruined Sea for the same matter. In this case, it was more appropriate for him to go with Progenitor Miaoying. Qin Shi was naturally interested in this secret place in the returning Ruined Sea. Where could he find a fated chance to advance to the deification realm in the celestial pole? He had just advanced to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so his cultivation speed had become very slow recently. He came to Yunzhong for 2 reasons. First, Tiange had been away for too long, so he couldn't let go of her. Second, he wanted to find some fated chances for himself. Besides, Tiange was involved in this matter, so he could take care of her if he went. But he didn't expect that as soon as he arrived, he would find Tiange being chased by a middle-stage nascent soul devil cultivator. Based on the reactions of the late-stage nascent soul cultivators, it wasn't difficult to guess that this devil cultivator didn't have any backup. That being the case, it was better to kill him before the secret place opened. It was better than being restrained by him after entering the secret place. Besides, this person had repeatedly indicated that he wanted to kill Tiange to vent his anger. If he wasn't eliminated, he would always be a hidden danger. Senior Marshal Brother, Tiange whispered behind him, this person's cultivation technique is the same as Master Song Fang's. Are you confident? Qin Shi had already noticed this. Others might not know what was going on with Master Song Fang's cultivation technique, but he knew it very well. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't be so confident." Mo Tiange was stunned, but then she thought about it again. Master Song Feng was their archenemy, and they would have to fight him sooner or later. After Senior Marshal Brother advanced to the nascent soul realm, he probably came up with a way to restrain Master Song Feng. She felt a little relieved and stepped back. I understand. The primordial devil aura on Mei Feng's body became thicker and thicker, almost enveloping her whole body. However, compared to Master Song Feng's black cloud, it was still a bit inferior. Qin Shi waved his sleeve. The 3-yang real fire sword that had been revolving around him let out a clear cry and turned into a tangible sword aura. The sword aura was golden, but it was completely red and was tightly surrounded by the 3-yang real fire. Seeing this, Master Taoist Yuanmu raised his eyebrows and said to Primordial Lady Miaoying, the sword turned invisible. Fellow Taoist Qin's strength is really extraordinary. A cultivator's sword was originally a magic weapon, and all magic weapons had forms. Turning something tangible into intangible required not only a high cultivation level, but also a deep understanding of the nature of spiritual aura. The former wasn't difficult for cultivators above the nascent soul realm to meet this requirement, but the latter was absolutely impossible unless it was someone with excellent comprehension and a thorough understanding of the way of celestials. Primordial Lady Miaoying said with a smile, "If that wasn't the case, why would I praise this fellow Taoist Qin so much? In the whole of Yunzhong, probably only a few old guys like us can turn our swords invisible, and this fellow Taoist Qin is only about 300 years old." What? Master Taoist Yuanmu was taken aback. Turning his swords invisible meant that this fellow Taoist Qin was qualified to talk to them, cultivators in the late nascent soul realm. However, his lifespan was only 300 years old, which was a bit shocking for a powerful middle-stage nascent soul cultivator. Primordial Lady Miaoying still said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yuanmu, you're a top genius cultivator in Yunzhong. As far as I know, you advanced to the late stage of the nascent soul realm after you were 500 years old, right? And I'm even worse than you, I only advanced to the late stage when I was 700 years old." Master Taoist Yuanmu took a deep breath and looked at Qin Shi with a meaningful gaze. "I thought Yunzhong had the highest cultivation level among all the continents, but now it seems I underestimated him too much." Chapter 451. Formless Sword Transformation. Mei Feng was also shocked. Although he was a devil cultivator, he was a nascent soul cultivator after all, so he still had a discerning eye. As soon as he saw this technique, he knew this person's divine power wasn't small, so he immediately became vigilant. However, in the past 50 years, the more he practiced the primordial devil art, the more he felt it was powerful. The techniques he practiced before couldn't be compared to it at all, and his body was tempered by the primordial devil aura to become extremely sturdy. He firmly believed that even if this person's divine power wasn't small, his primordial devil art wouldn't lose to him. At this thought, Mei Feng snorted coldly. His feet didn't move, but his body also melted into the black fog and floated in the air. Qin Shi didn't move, but the sword aura formed by his three-yang real fire sword was constantly changing. One sword aura turned into two, two into four, four into 8. In an instant, it turned into over 100 identical sword auras. These sword auras revolved around him at a regular speed, forming a sword formation. Each sword aura emitted a strong momentum. Seeing this, Mo Tiange operated the art of primordial origin to protect herself, but she was very happy. Although she hadn't advanced into the nascent soul realm, she could see that Qin Shi's method clearly showed that he had cultivated the sword art accompanying the three-yang real fire sword to a very high level. The divine power he practiced was good at destruction and famous for its power. Now that he'd cultivated the three-yang real fire sword to this stage, even if he were to fight against Master Song Feng, he'd still have the power to fight. But this Mei Feng obviously didn't practice the primordial devil great technique deeply, so he was far inferior to Master Song Feng. As soon as he saw Qin Shi's sword formation, Mei Feng's expression changed, and he immediately decided to make the first move. As the black aura on his body became thicker and thicker, wind suddenly blew on the island. The wind became stronger and stronger, carrying black devil aura and even covering the sky. This kind of movement made the nascent soul cultivators on the island change their expressions. Mei Feng's strength was also extraordinary to be able to cause such turbulence. Seeing this, the three devil monarchs all frowned. They practiced devil techniques, so it wasn't difficult to see that this devil technique was very advanced. The three of them secretly compared whether Mei Feng's devil technique was more advanced than theirs. Taoist Yuanmu, this Mei Feng is also very strong. This battle is going to be interesting. Scholar Yu tapped the fan in his hand and said with interest. Reverend Yuanmu smiled and asked, in Mr. Yu's opinion, which of the two will win? Scholar Yu stroked his chin and shook his head with a smile. One Taoist, one devil, each with their own unique moves. It's hard to say. In terms of cultivation, the two of them weren't too far apart. In terms of methods, one had formless swords, while the other had monstrous demonic energy. They both had their own divine abilities. Amitabha. Paragana Vidya chanted the name of Buddha and said with a smile, "These two fellow Taoists have extraordinary divine abilities. I'm afraid that both of them will suffer heavy injuries." Progenitor Miaoying's eyes flickered when she heard this. She said, "I have a different opinion." "Oh?" Reverend Yuanmu asked. Junior Martial Sister Miaoying has always had a unique insight. "What did you see?" Progenitor Miaoying smiled and said, "This is not a friendly duel, but a fight to the death." This was suggested by fellow Taoist Qin. Scholar Yu's eyes flickered. He seemed to understand something. Junior Martial Sister Miaoying means, in the current situation, the mysterious space in the sea of returning ruins is about to open. His Taoist companion is among the nascent soul cultivators and urgently needs help, but fellow Taoist Qin chose to fight to the death with a cultivator of the same realm. Isn't he afraid that his Taoist companion will be alone and helpless if both of them suffer heavy injuries? From what I know these days, this fellow Taoist Qin isn't a fool. When the late nascent soul cultivators heard this, they all fell silent. In that case, this fellow Taoist Qin was 80% sure he could kill Mei Feng. While the late nascent soul cultivators were discussing, Qin Shi and Mei Feng had already started fighting. Mei Feng's demonic aura gathered more and more, and suddenly, it rushed towards Qin Shi. The unique feature of primordial devil art was that it didn't require the help of magic weapons or other external objects during fights of magical powers. Demonic aura was their strongest means of attack. This primordial devil aura could both attack and defend, and it was extremely corrosive. If it was hit, it would invade the opponent's body. At that time, the person corroded by the demonic aura would be in excruciating pain. Qin Shi didn't panic at all. The sword aura formed by the three yang real fire swords around him suddenly shone brightly. The golden light flickered, and the red light was dazzling, turning into a sea of sword lights. Boom! The sword formation and the primordial devil chi collided, resulting in a violent explosion of spiritual chi. Not to mention the core formation cultivators, even the nascent soul cultivators with slightly lower cultivation levels felt their minds tremble. Many people were horrified. The middle stage of the nascent soul realm was actually this powerful. Didn't it mean that early stage nascent soul cultivators like them wouldn't last more than a few breaths against the opponent? Seeing this, revered Avidya flicked his kasaya, once again protecting the core formation juniors. The cultivation technique he practiced was gentle and good at defense. It was the most suitable for this kind of thing. Being enveloped by revered Avidya's golden light, Mo Tiange felt very grateful. She cupped her hands and bowed to him to express her gratitude. Although this revered Avidya was on the same side as Master Daoist Yuanmu and the others, it was already very rare for him to take care of her in such subtle ways. Qin. Fellow Daoist Mo, a voice rang in her ears. It was Ling Yunhe. Before, Mei Feng suddenly attacked, followed by Qin Shi's arrival. He was suppressed by the auras of two middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, so it was inconvenient for him to move. It wasn't until Mo Tiange retreated to the side that he had a chance to talk to her. So this is where fellow Daoist Mo's previous name came from. It's inconvenient for me to address you in the future. Ling Yunhe stared at her with a somewhat complicated smile. Seeing that Qin Shi was handling Mei Feng's attacks with ease, Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved. She then replied, "To be honest, fellow Daoist Ling, my sex Daoist name is Qingwei. After I came to Yunzhong, I changed my name to Qinwei. This surname is actually a coincidence." "Is that so?" Ling Yunhe smiled faintly and didn't say anything else about this matter. Just like her, he raised his head and watched the fight between the two of them attentively. Every time Mei Feng's primordial devil aura attacked, it was blocked by Qin Shi's sword formation. Mei Feng couldn't do anything to him. However, as the two of them fought, the strands of primordial devil aura slowly dispersed and lingered around Qin Shi's sword aura. Ling Yunhe frowned and said, "Fellow Daoist Imo, this devil aura is unusual." If the sword aura is corroded, Mo Tiange was also worried, but she said firmly, "Senior martial brother definitely has a way." After a few times, the primordial devil aura around Qin Shi's sword aura became more and more numerous. This black aura wandered around the sword aura, even causing the sword aura's light to dim a lot. Seeing this, Mei Feng burst into laughter. "Fellow Daoist Qin, my devil aura isn't ordinary devil aura. If I destroy your sword aura, let's see what you can do." Qin Shi frowned slightly, but in the next second, he sneered. "You want to destroy my sword aura with just this devil aura? Naive." Right after he said that, a flame suddenly sprang out from his arm. However, this flame wasn't red like his three yang real fire. Instead, it was a cold, deep blue color. The flame sprang out from his arm and covered all the sword aura in an instant. The blue flame crawled slowly on the sword, from a deep blue color to a light blue, then to a deep blue. In the next second, Mei Feng's expression suddenly changed. These blue flames actually completely devoured the primordial devil aura wandering around his sword aura. He was in disbelief. Impossible. He'd seen the corrosive power of primordial devil aura with his own eyes. No matter how solid the material was, as long as it was devoured by primordial devil aura, it would be slowly corroded without exception. Before he could figure it out, Qin Shi had already retracted the blue flame. With a shake of his arm, the sword formation shone brightly and spread out inch by inch. Before this, his sword formation already had more than 100 sword auras. But now, one turned into two turned into four, making it impossible to count the number of people. These sword auras spread out in the air like a golden ocean. The momentum was so great that it almost made people feel like they'd be drowned in the next moment. Qin Shi made an incantation gesture and shouted, "Go!" The overwhelming sword aura surged towards Mei Feng. Mei Feng snorted coldly. His devil aura surged and protected him. The momentum of primordial devil aura was far inferior to Qin Shi's sword formation, but when the sword formation encountered primordial devil aura, it couldn't advance an inch. "You want to kill me with this?" Wishful thinking. Mei Feng's voice came from the black cloud. Qin Shi smiled coldly. Suddenly, several sword auras sprang out from his arm, but it was an even smaller sword formation. This small sword formation didn't have the vast momentum from before, nor did it have a dazzling light. Instead, it was faint blue and silently flew towards Mei Feng. Puff, puff, two light sounds rang out in succession. Several blue sword auras sprang out from Qin Shi's arm and pierced into the black cloud in less than a breath's time. "Ah!" a scream came from the black cloud. Mei Feng shouted angrily, "Impossible. This is impossible." His primordial devil aura was actually pierced through. How was this possible? He was about to gather primordial devil aura to push these sword auras out, but the next moment, he suddenly felt a sharp pain and a burning sensation instantly drowned him. Boom! A ball of burning black aura fell down. The faint blue flame slowly swallowed the black aura bit by bit. In the end, even the person inside was burned to ashes. Only a chinkuan bag fell out. Qin Shi heaved a sigh of relief. With a wave of his arm, all the sword auras merged into one. Finally, they turned into the three yang real fire sword and returned to his body. Seeing this, the small island was silent for a while. Nascent soul cultivators had high standards. They could all see that the key to Qin Shi's victory was that domineering blue flame. But none of them recognized this thing. "Fellow Daoist Qin, you're very skillful." The first to react was progenitor Miaoying. She smiled slightly and swung her horsetail whisk, sending Mei Feng's chinkuan bag to Qin Shi. She said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, what kind of divine power is this?" Qin Shi took the chinkuan bag and answered, "This is my natal magic weapon, the three yang real fire sword." "Is that so?" Progenitor Miaoying asked again, "What is that blue flame?" "It's really domineering." Qin answered with a smile, that's a divine power I comprehended when I formed my nascent soul, extreme young real fire. I'm only at the initial stage now. Sorry for making you laugh at me, fellow Taoist Miaoying. Progenitor Miaoying wanted to say something else, but the crisp sound of a bell suddenly came from the sky. The sound of the bell came with the wind. It seemed to come from very far away, but everyone could clearly hear it. Progenitor Miaoying stopped talking and said with a smile, fellow Taoist Ma, you're finally here. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange looked up and saw a skinny old man riding a donkey in the air. Chapter 452. The ringing of the bell came from afar. Ding ling was crisp and pleasant to the ear. Once she heard it, she felt refreshed and intoxicated. Qin suddenly turned around and said to her, focus and guard your heart. Mo Tiange immediately understood what he meant. As soon as she heard the ringing of the bell, her mind was involuntarily drawn to it. This should be a high-grade sound-type magic weapon. However, the other party didn't seem to want to attack, so she just needed to be careful and everything would be fine. Accompanied by the crisp ringing of the bell, the old man riding the donkey appeared to be moving slowly, but he arrived in front of her in an instant. This old man was very thin and wore a wrinkled dark blue Taoist robe. His hair was tied into a bun, his beard and hair were white, and his face was full of wrinkles, but he was smiling so much that his eyes couldn't be seen. He was riding the donkey with a calabash on his back, swinging his slender whip while humming to himself, but no one on the island dared to look down on him. In terms of appearance, this skinny old man looked no different from an old Taoist in the secular world who made a living as a fortune-teller, but no one on the island dared to look down on him. Because he was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, and even the donkey he was riding was an 8th-rank spiritual beast. This was the first time Mo Tiange saw an 8th-rank spiritual beast beside a cultivator. Spiritual beasts weren't easy to feed. Even for nascent soul cultivators, raising them to the 6th or 7th rank was already extremely difficult. Advancing to the 8th rank was equivalent to the early stage of the nascent soul realm for humans. The 8th rank was a hurdle for spiritual beasts, and it wasn't much easier for nascent soul cultivators to advance to the nascent soul realm. Fellow Taoist Ma, you're a bit late. When this person landed, Master Taoist Yuanmu greeted him with a smile. The old man dismounted from the donkey, swung his whip lightly, and said with a smile, fellow Taoists, thank you for waiting. Fortunately, I'm not late. While they were chatting, Qin had already returned to Mo Tiange's side. This is. He looked at Ling Yunhe next to Mo Tiange with a questioning expression. Before Mo Tiange could speak, Ling Yunhe raised his hand and saluted. Junior Ling Yunhe, a disciple of Jiuyuan sect, greets senior. Although his cultivation level was inferior, he was neither servile nor overbearing. Qin smiled and returned the salute, but he didn't say his name. In front of Ling Yunhe, he was a senior. That was enough. Ling Yunhe turned to look at Mo Tiange, then smiled at the two of them. Fellow Taoist Mo, I won't disturb your reunion with your husband anymore. Call me if you need anything. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. Ling Yunhe turned around, took 2 steps, and suddenly stopped. He looked back and said, by the way, fellow Taoist Mo, during our trip to Carefree Valley, I gave you a returning favor medallion. Now that I've made my promise, the returning favor medallion, Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Only now did she remember this matter. She took out the token of repayment that she had forgotten about from her Qinkuan bag and said with a smile, I'm really sorry. I almost forgot about this thing. Ling Yunhe smiled and took the medallion of repayment. Without saying anything, he turned around and left. Qin stared at his back thoughtfully. What's wrong? Mo Tiange was baffled. The two of them shouldn't know each other, right? It's nothing. Qin glossed it over. Since she didn't realize it, there was no need to say it out loud. From the moment they arrived on the island to the moment they killed Mei Feng, they didn't stop to rest, so the two of them finally had a chance to take a closer look at each other. Seeing that Imotienga's cultivation level was already in the peak stage of the core formation realm and that she wasn't injured, she finally felt relieved. He held her hand and said with a sigh, "What happened to you? Why did the undersea passage to Yunzhong collapse? Why did you provoke these nascent soul cultivators? You were actually chased by a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator. What if I came one step later?" Imotienga didn't answer immediately. These questions couldn't be answered in a short time. Besides, she was fine now, so these questions weren't important. On the other hand, she looked like he was obviously in trouble. She said, "Take your time. Senior Marshal brother, let's talk about you first. Why did you come to Yunzhong? Also, how did you become like this? A few years ago, I sensed the blood oath. Was it because you were injured? What about your injuries? Have they healed?" Upon hearing her question, she smiled and stroked her face. "It's all right. If my injuries hadn't healed, I wouldn't have been able to kill that devil cultivator." He said, "You've been gone for 50 years without any news from me. How could I not be worried? At first, I sensed you were injured, so I thought maybe you needed time to heal, so you didn't come back. But 30 years passed and I came out of closed-door meditation, but you still didn't come back. At that time, I was worried that something might have happened to you. Later, I followed the route you left, but I found that the passage had collapsed and I couldn't pass through it. Now I know why you didn't come back." Imotienga sighed. "If the passage hadn't collapsed, I would have gone back long ago. Not long after I came to Yunzhong, I met Mei Feng. He was the city lord of Starfall City in the Devil Domain. I don't know where he got the primordial devil technique, but he tricked more than 10 core formation cultivators into helping him practice devil techniques. In the end, because of me, all his efforts were in vain. Later, his Starfall City was destroyed by City Lord Yi Shao. At that time, I was injured by him, so I could only hide in the virtual sky world to heal. It took me 10 years to stabilize my realm. Later, one of the 5 holy objects in Yunzhong, the Heavenly Devil Tower, appeared, and the whole of Yunzhong fell into turmoil. I was going to leave, but I found that the passage had collapsed. So you were injured by him back then? She frowned, glanced at Mei Feng's burnt body, and said coldly, "Then he didn't feel wronged when I killed him." Even if she hadn't come, she would have killed Mei Feng when she had the strength. If she hadn't been injured by him, she wouldn't have stayed in Yunzhong for so long. In the end, the South Pole Island sank, and she couldn't go back even if she wanted to. However, this person was already dead, so Imotienga didn't want to talk about it. She asked again, "Senior Marshal brother, how did you come to Yunzhong? Did you cross the South Sea? What else could I do?" She reached out and stroked her hair. "I sensed you were injured. Although I was worried, I believed you could deal with it yourself. Moreover, I was in a critical moment of my closed-door meditation at that time, so I couldn't spare myself. But later, I found that the passage collapsed. With your cultivation level, you couldn't cross the South Sea and come back. If you want to cross the South Sea, you have to form your nascent soul. But how can you be sure about forming your nascent soul? After thinking about it, I could only come to Yunzhong to pick you up. Then your injuries, I told you I'm fine," she comforted her. "After I found the passage collapsed, I decided to come to Yunzhong by myself. However, I asked Master's opinion. Master thought that although I've made some progress in my divine power, my cultivation level is still low. The South Sea is dangerous, and I didn't have much confidence, so I decided to improve my cultivation level first." He smiled and said, "Before you left so many medicinal pills. It was with these medicinal pills that I was able to enter the middle stage in one fell swoop." Hearing this, Imotienga couldn't help but feel lucky. Fortunately, she left all the medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators. Otherwise, she didn't know how many years it would take for him to advance and how many years it would be before the two of them could meet again. "When I advanced to the middle stage and you still didn't come back, I decided to come to Yunzhong. The South Sea is really dangerous. I spent a lot of time and thought I made perfect preparations, but in the end, I was still seriously injured when I crossed the sea. I see. Crossing the South Sea had always been considered an extremely dangerous thing. Even late-stage nascent soul cultivators couldn't guarantee that nothing would go wrong. Fortunately, I finally made it to Yunzhong alive. However, when I crossed the sea, I lost a Qinkuan bag. That Qinkuan bag contained a lot of spiritual herbs and sundries. Because of that, I had to delay healing my injuries. Ah! Although he was standing in front of her, Mo Tianga's heart still skipped a beat. Then your injuries, Qin, she said with a smile, they're nothing. It's mainly because the sea beasts in the South Sea were too powerful. They heavily injured my body, but my dantian and meridians weren't seriously injured. He paused for a moment then continued, since I was injured, I had to find a place to stay and heal my injuries first. It took me a few years to finally restore my cultivation level, but my body was a lot worse. If I hadn't practiced body refining technique, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to restore my cultivation level in just a few years. So that's why you became like this? Mo Tiange finally felt relieved. For cultivators, as long as their dantian and meridians were intact, physical injuries would be healed after some rest. Qin, she nodded. Yes. After my injuries were mostly healed, I looked for suitable spiritual herbs while looking for your whereabouts. But you didn't use the names Yi Xiaotian and Mo Tiange, so I couldn't find any clues for a while. Later, I found a sect disciple's order to look for Qin Wei and saw your portrait. Only then did I know you changed your name. But Qin Wei disappeared for many years. Even the big sects in Yunzhong couldn't find her, so how could I find her? Mo Tiange was puzzled. Senior martial brother, since you came to Yunzhong, why didn't you use a sound-transmitting talisman to contact me? Qin, she smiled bitterly. There was a sound-transmitting talisman in the Qinkuan bag I lost. Mo Tiange was stunned and sighed helplessly. How could it be so coincidental? If she had contacted him at that time, she definitely wouldn't have chosen to come to the Sea of Returning Ruins now. The reason why she chose to go to the Sea of Returning Ruins now was to get some fated chances there so she could advance to the nascent soul realm and return to the celestial pole. If the two of them had met at that time, she would have chosen a safer way to advance to the nascent soul realm. Once she succeeded, she would have gone through the South Sea again and borrowed a magic weapon from Nia Wushang to cross the sea. At that time, the danger of returning to the celestial pole would be much smaller. As for this secret place in the Sea of Returning Ruins, it wouldn't be too late to come back when they had enough strength. But there was no turning back now. With so many nascent soul cultivators here, they could only think about it after entering the secret place. However, she had Fu Yaozi as her master to guide her, and now she had Qin Shi's help, so she was much more confident than before. Is this fellow Taoist Qin? A voice suddenly came from the side. The two of them turned around and saw the queen of the nascent soul cultivator surnamed Ma leading the donkey. At that moment, he was smiling so widely that only his teeth could be seen. This was a cultivator in the nascent soul realm. The two of them cupped their fists and bowed politely. Qin, she said, yes, it's me. Greetings, fellow Taoist. Hee hee. The skinny old man stroked his sparse beard and said, fellow Taoist Qin is really capable. This old man sensed the power of fellow Taoist Qin's magic weapon from afar, especially the last divine ability. It's called Extreme Yang Real Fire, right? This old man has never seen the power of this fire in my life. Thank you for your praise, fellow Taoist. Oh, right. The old man seemed to have just remembered. I haven't introduced myself to fellow Taoist Qin. This old man's surname is Ma. Because I'm always accompanied by donkeys, the fellow Taoists who are familiar with me jokingly call me Old Donkey Ma. Chapter 453. Old Donkey Ma. Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile. she had seen quite a number of late nascent soul cultivators. Among them, there were some who were kind and approachable, but she had never seen someone like old Donkey Ma, who did not care about the demeanor of late nascent soul cultivators and teased his name. Qin Shi was also stunned. So it's fellow Daoist Ma. Old Donkey Ma turned to Mo Tiange with a smile. Is this little girl the person the Fuxing sword recognized as its master? Mo Tiange stopped smiling and bowed. Greetings, senior. You don't have to be so serious. Old Donkey Ma smiled. I'm really envious of you for being recognized by Senior Fuyaozi. Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, is Senior Ma also one of Senior Fuyaozi's admirers? Hee, Old Donkey Ma said, how many individual cultivators in Yunzhong don't admire Senior Fuyaozi? Before Senior Fuyaozi passed away, he publicized many of his cultivation experiences to the world. Who doesn't admire such behavior? We individual cultivators in Yunzhong have benefited a lot from Senior Fuyaozi. Mo Tiange remembered Lingyan said there was an individual cultivator among late-stage nascent cultivators. It seemed that person was Senior Ma. She said respectfully, Senior, as an individual cultivator, managed to cultivate to the late stage of nascent soul. You're also a talented person. Far from it, far from it. Old Donkey Ma waved his hand. Not to mention the gap between late-stage nascent soul and deification. Even when Senior Fuyaozi was in the nascent soul realm, he was much more brilliant than me. Old Donkey Ma's expression was very natural. He didn't look proud at all and seemed to be speaking from the bottom of his heart. Mo Tiange now recognized Fuyaozi as her master. She couldn't help but have a good impression of him since he respected her master so much. Oh, I heard that the two of you have reunited after a long time. I guess you have a lot to talk about. This old man is just here to say hello. I won't disturb you anymore. After saying that, he waved his hand and led the donkey away. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi couldn't help but smile at each other. The donkey that old Donkey Ma was leading looked no different from an ordinary donkey. However, its hooves were snow white and its eyes were like jade. Clearly, it was an extremely precious spirit beast, just that it looked like a donkey. While looking at the donkey, Mo Tiange said, 8th rank spiritual beasts are really awe-inspiring. It'd be great if Xiaohua and the others could also make a realm breakthrough. She didn't know why, but after all these years, the three of them didn't show any signs of advancing to the 5th rank. According to reason, the spiritual plants in the virtual sky world were always free for them to eat, so their cultivation speed shouldn't be much slower than hers. It seemed she had to ask Fei Fei next time. Qin Shi smiled and said, what's the rush? Spirit beasts don't advance as fast as human cultivators. They have a long lifespan. Mo Tiange thought it made sense. In the past few years, because she kept feeding them medicinal pills without stopping, these spiritual beasts advanced very quickly. She almost forgot about this matter. Perhaps the reason why Xiaohua and the others didn't advance was because of spiritual beasts' instincts. By the way, how is Master? Is his injury better? Qin Shi smiled. Master can be said to have profited from a disaster. The medicinal pills you left not only preserved his cultivation level but also helped him smoothly break through to the late stage. Is that so? Mo Tiange was pleasantly surprised. Master is now a late-stage cultivator? If not, how could I advance to the middle stage so smoothly? Advancing to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm in 50 years. This cultivation speed was really amazing. In addition to a large number of medicinal pills, he also had the help of late-stage nascent soul cultivators. If Lord Daoist Jinghe advanced smoothly and Lord Daoist Jinyang had the help of 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, his advancement would be much smoother. Mo Tiange was very happy to hear this news. She knew that although her master was arrogant, he was actually quite unlucky on the path of cultivation. Although he was talented and had good comprehension, he never encountered any amazing fated chances. He had to rely on himself to cultivate step by step. After several hundred years of accumulation, he could only reach the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Now that her master could advance to the late stage, he could finally hold his head high. After being separated for more than 50 years, the two of them felt they had countless things to talk about: their own experiences, the situation of their old friends, the changes in the celestial pole, the situation in Yunzhong, and how they missed each other. Another half a day passed, but no cultivators came to the island. After the late-stage nascent soul cultivators discussed for a while, Master Daoist Yuanmu said to the two of them, "Fellow Daoist Qin, little friend Mo, time's up. Shall we open the space now?" Qin Shi looked down at Mo Tiange. Although he had a general understanding of this matter, he didn't know it as well as Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange naturally didn't have any objections. She was already prepared and briefly told Qin Shi her plan, so she said, "Senior, please make the decision." Master Daoist Yuanmu nodded, looked up at the cultivators on the island, and said loudly, "Fellow Daoists, the agreed time is up. We'll open the Five Saints' secret place now." Hearing this, all the nascent soul cultivators on the island showed excited and solemn expressions. They gathered on this island for the deification fated chances in the mysterious space in the Sea of Returning Ruins. But since there was a fated chance for deification in this space, it must be very difficult to break through. In addition, there were so many nascent soul cultivators on this trip, and they were in a competitive relationship. With treasures in front of them, they also had to be on guard against other people's dirty tricks, so they had to be vigilant. The reason they could get such an opportunity was because of the invitation from the three groups that had holy relics. The other party had holy relics, so even if they had no other choice, how could they possibly share the fated chance with others? Therefore, it would certainly be very difficult for them to get the fated chance. After announcing that the Five Saints' secret place was about to open, Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't immediately call the 5 juniors to start. Instead, he slowly swept his gaze over the cultivators on the island. Master Daoist Yuanmu's cultivation level was among the best in Yunzhong, and he was also the head Grand Supreme Elder of Juyan sect. Although he usually didn't manage things, he definitely had the dignity he deserved. Now that his gaze swept over them, these nascent soul cultivators who were usually awe-inspiring couldn't help but feel their imposing manner suppressed by him. "Everyone," he said slowly, "the mysterious space in the Sea of Returning Ruins benefits from us, the 5 saints in Yunzhong. Therefore, although we have the key to the space, we don't dare to take the 5 saints' secret place for ourselves. However, everyone must know that we suffered huge losses in obtaining the space key. Our sect's soul-restraining bead and Huayan Temple's inescapable net were passed down through generations of painstaking inheritances. Therefore, before we enter this mysterious space, we'll first set a few rules. What do you think?" None of the cultivators expressed any objections to what he said. The cultivator surnamed Nan from Danxia sect was the first to say with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu is willing to share the 5 saints' secret place with us, so we're naturally grateful. Fellow Daoists have contributed more than us, so it's only right that you get more benefits." Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange couldn't help but take another look at him. Cultivators had amazing memories. She remembered that this cultivator who looked like a rich man was the one who paid attention to her on One Leaf Island, but she didn't recognize him. What this person said just now was really thought-provoking. His expression was very sincere, and what he said was also reasonable. However, get more benefits, no matter how she looked at it, it seemed like there was a hidden meaning behind it. In the face of benefits, there weren't many reasonable cultivators, especially nascent soul cultivators like them. What they were fighting for was the fated chance to advance to the deification realm. How could they be willing to give this to others? If other cultivators heard what he said, they probably couldn't help but have other thoughts in their hearts. She didn't know whether Master Daoist Yuanmu also felt the same. He cast a rather meaningful glance at the cultivator surnamed Nan and said, "Fellow Daoist Nan is so understanding, this old man is really touched." Under such a gaze, the cultivator surnamed Nan couldn't help but turn his head away. However, he still wore a smile on his face, hiding his embarrassment very well. In terms of strength, this cultivator surnamed Nan was a lot weaker than Master Daoist Yuanmu. Right now, Dawning Danxia sect couldn't fight against Juyan's sect at all, so he could only avoid Master Daoist Yuanmu's sharp edge. Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't pester him anymore and continued to say, "Everyone, I've discussed this matter with the late nascent soul fellow Taoists and received their approval. Therefore, this matter is also the intention of all late nascent soul cultivators." Upon hearing what he said, the nascent soul cultivators on the small island all revealed cautious expressions. What all late nascent soul cultivators said was no small matter. The 11 late nascent soul cultivators present were the best cultivators in Yunzhong. Every one of them had astonishing divine abilities and could easily kill early-stage nascent soul cultivators, let alone 11 late nascent soul cultivators working together. It could be said that these 11 late nascent soul cultivators could completely wipe out everyone else. It seemed these so-called rules were already a fact, and the others simply had no room to object. It was just that they didn't know if it would harm their interests. Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't make them wait for too long. He slowly said, "First, let me first remind everyone that according to the 5 saints' last words, this mysterious space is actually a spatial crack left behind from ancient times. There are many unknown restrictions inside, and entering this space is extremely dangerous. If you encounter anything, you'll have to bear the consequences." As soon as he finished speaking, someone said, "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, how can there be no danger in a land of opportunity? The greater the opportunity, the higher the danger. This is something we all know, so naturally, we won't have any complaints." All the nascent soul cultivators nodded. They weren't low-level qi refining and foundation establishment cultivators. As nascent soul cultivators, they naturally understood this principle. Master Daoist Yuanmu continued, "Second, this space is very large. After entering, everyone can split up and search for treasures. If there are any disputes during the treasure search, we won't interfere. However, you must not harm the lives of the 5 young Taoists who have the keys. If anyone violates this taboo, we'll immediately kill them." At this point, Master Daoist Yuanmu's smiling expression was now filled with murderous intent. Without waiting for anyone to say anything, Master Daoist Yuanmu continued, "Third, if everyone finds any treasures at the same time, the 5 of us who have contributed the keys will have the priority to choose." The others were silent for a while after hearing this. The first 2 were just reminders, but this was the only one that involved their immediate interests. In the end, it was Progenitor Miao Ying who smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu's request is supported by us and the other nascent soul cultivators. The 5 sacred relics are extremely precious. Since you've contributed them, you naturally have the priority to choose." Hearing Progenitor Miao Ying's words, someone quickly echoed, "That's right. We've already benefited from fellow Daoist Yuanmu and the others. We didn't do anything, but we were able to enter the legendary 5 saints' secret place. What else can we ask for?" Many people nodded, and those who didn't nodded also tacitly agreed. Seeing that no one had any objections, Master Daoist Yuanmu smiled. "Then it's settled. Apart from these 3 points, there's nothing else to explain. Once this mysterious space is opened, there's only exit, not entry. Whether you can get out or not will depend on your own abilities." Chapter 454. "Come here, all of you," Master Daoist Yuanmu said to the 5 core formation cultivators present. Mo Tiange knew they were about to open the space. She glanced at Qin Shi and saw him nod. A red light appeared in his sleeve, so she walked towards Master Daoist Yuanmu. Before this, she had a discussion with Fu Yaozi about what to do if he used his powerful strength to restrain her and threatened her with his life. At that time, Fu Yaozi said casually that it would depend on who was more ruthless, whether he was unwilling to give up the opportunity to open the secret area or she was unwilling to give up her life. Fu Yaozi fought his way up from an individual cultivator to the number 1 cultivator in Yunzhong. Although he had a kind temperament, he was very straightforward. Coincidentally, Mo Tiange was also like that. She didn't like the feeling of being afraid of the slightest thing. Apart from being cautious, she had always been unafraid of taking risks. This was related to her experience of roaming Kunwo with second uncle in the past. As an individual cultivator, how could she possibly be well prepared? Sometimes, whether one could survive or not depended on whether they dared to risk their lives. If there was even the slightest trace of fear, they might die in a dangerous situation. On the other hand, those who dared to risk their lives could instead obtain a slim chance of survival. Now that Qin Shi had arrived, she had a bit more confidence. Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword was obtained from an ancient secret technique and was extremely powerful. When he killed Mei Feng just now, he already showed his strength. Although this kind of strength could only contend against a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, how could these late-stage nascent soul cultivators be willing to risk their lives to fight a cultivator of the same strength before entering the secret area? If they were injured, others would take advantage of them. Master Daoist Yuanmu glanced at Qin Shi. Sure enough, there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. He shook his head and said, "When the sacred object recognized its master, the 5 of you should have already received the 5 seniors' secret to opening it. This old man doesn't need to say more. Just get ready." Mo Tiange and the other 4 didn't say anything and each stood in a position. The 5 of them formed a triangle, forming the shape of a 5-pointed star. Once they were in position, Mo Tiange swept her gaze over the other 4 people. Jia Wu still had a smile on his face, seemingly not taking this matter to heart. Ling Yunhe had a solemn expression. Yang Qingji was expressionless. As for Han Shizhi's eyes, they met each other's, revealing coldness. Mo Tiange smiled faintly. Of course, she knew why Han Shizhi looked at her like that. When she had obtained the life-giving sword, Han Shizhi had tried to steal it from her. If Han Shizhi had gotten his hands on the life-giving sword, he would have had 2 saint items. Today, the opening of the 5 saints' secret grounds would have nothing to do with her. It was a pity that Han Shizhi did not know that the conditions for the revival sword to recognize its owner were so strict. If he had snatched the revival sword, the 5 saints' secret area would not have been opened in the near future. Let's begin. Following Reverend Yuanmu's order, the 5 of them took out 5 sacred objects respectively, closed their eyes, and chanted a series of incantations. Whoosh! The 5 sacred treasures issued clear sounds and flew out of the 5 people's hands, floating above their heads. These 5 sacred objects immediately attracted the attention of all the nascent soul cultivators. Apart from the function of opening spatial rifts, these 5 holy objects were the most powerful treasures in the hands of the 5 sages. How could they be underestimated? Other things aside, just the heavenly demon pagoda alone was enough to greatly increase the strength of a demonic cultivator. At this time, the 5 sacred objects each emitted a light with an amazing momentum. Although they were envious, no one dared to have any ideas. After all, compared with the opportunity to reach the divine transformation realm, these magic treasures were not worth mentioning. The 5 sacred objects became brighter and brighter. Finally, with a buzzing sound, a white light rose from each of the 5 sacred objects. When the white light dissipated, 5 smoke-like figures floated in the air. Seeing this scene, everyone sucked in a cold breath, including the 11 late nascent soul stage cultivators. Although these 5 figures were only illusions made of smoke, they were like real people with spiritual energy fluctuations. One was a monk, one was a scholar, and one was a demon. After a little thought, everyone knew that these were the images of the 5 sages. These 5 sages were figures from tens of thousands of years ago. When they left these 5 sacred objects, their cultivation was far from the peak. However, their magical power was much stronger than that of the 11 late nascent soul cultivators present. Many people sighed with emotion. The 5 sages were indeed the 5 sages. In the past hundreds of thousands of years, many powerful late nascent soul cultivators had appeared in Yunzhong, but only the 5 of them were called the 5 sages. This was not a coincidence. When the 5 core formation cultivators finished reciting the incantation, the 5 sages' projections suddenly began to move. Unexpectedly, they too began to form hand seals. Then, the 5 sages' projections suddenly transformed into rays of light, converging into a gigantic ball of light. This bead's power was astonishing. It was actually stronger than the spiritual aura pressure of late-stage, nascent soul cultivators. If the 5 of them didn't have the protection of the 5 sacred objects, they probably wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Master. Mo Tiange called out in a low voice upon seeing this. In her sea of knowledge, Fuyazi's voice rang out. Don't worry. The appearance of this bead means that the spatial rift can be opened. Right after Fuyazi finished speaking, the bead suddenly rose and exploded in the air with a loud bang. When the blinding light dissipated, everyone saw that a white teleportation portal had appeared in the sky above the island. Fellow Taoists. Seeing the appearance of the transportation portal, Master Taoist Yuanmu shouted, "This is the entrance to the 5 sages' secret place. From now on, this entrance will exist for about an hour. After an hour, this entrance will disappear and you won't be able to enter anymore." Hearing this, the island was suddenly in a commotion. Amitabha. Venerable Wuming chanted the name of Buddha, sounding like a great bell. He said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, don't fight. An hour is enough for us to enter. From now on, the people from the 5 forces represented by the 5 little fellow Taoists will enter first." The early-stage nascent soul cultivators with slightly lower cultivation levels were shaken by Venerable Wuming's chants. They didn't dare to fight and just waited obediently. Then, starting from Jiuyan sect, the cultivators from Huayan Temple, Yushan Academy, and Guifang City entered one by one. After the 4 sects finished, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi entered together. Then, it was the forces represented by the late-stage nascent soul cultivators, followed by the slightly weaker sects like Danxia sect and Wuxing Valley. Finally, it was the early-stage nascent soul cultivators' turn. After an incense stick's worth of time, the island was empty. Everyone entered the transportation portal. At this moment, a flight light flew over from the sky above returning Ruined Sea. After it arrived, it turned out to be an early-stage nascent soul cultivator wearing a blue robe and carrying a sword. This person looked at the empty island, then looked at the teleportation portal in the air. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped in. After entering the transportation portal, Mo Tiange already released the Art of Origin and white silk handkerchief. Qin Shi released the 3-yang real fire sword, forming a sword formation around the 2 of them in case of any accidents. As a result, they were very safe after entering. There were no restrictions and no demonic beasts. The 2 of them looked up and sized up the surrounding scenery, but they were greatly shocked. This so-called space crack was actually so big. The place where they entered was at the bottom of a mountain range. The mountain in front of them was several thousand feet high. The middle part was densely forested, and the peak was covered in white snow. It was incomparably magnificent. At the peak of the mountain, among the white snow, there was a palace that was completely white and emitted a faint spiritual light. "An immortal palace," a cultivator blurted out, looking at the palace at the top of the mountain in astonishment. An immortal palace naturally wasn't a real immortal's palace, but if this was a space crack torn open in the distant past, it was most likely the palace of a cultivation group with cultivators in the deification realm or above or even the Mahayana realm. Modern cultivators called such ancient ruins immortal palaces. Only immortal palaces would be full of spiritual light. Upon seeing this immortal palace, almost everyone's eyes shone with greed. Even those late-stage nascent soul cultivators were no exception. If this was really an immortal palace, it was no wonder there was an opportunity to enter the deification realm. It wasn't until now that all the cultivators had no doubt that there was an opportunity to enter the deification realm in this space. Humph. Fu Yaozi snorted coldly in her sea of knowledge. It's too early to be happy. Since it's an immortal palace, how could it be so easy to enter? Mo Tiange had already heard about the situation inside this space crack from Fu Yaozi, but she didn't expect it to be so big. This was almost the size of a large cultivation group's main mountain range and contained an entire spirit vein. Master, is there any restriction in this immortal palace? Naturally, there are restrictions, Fu Yaozi said. In this immortal palace, back then, the other 4 people and I put aside our differences and cooperated, but we were only able to enter the periphery. We couldn't enter the real immortal palace's interior. Mo Tianga's heart skipped a beat. She asked, Master, back then, the 5 of you were only in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, so why were you able to leave behind the keys? Then after we left, could we also do the same? This time, Fu Yaozi was silent for a long time before he finally said, back then, the reason we were able to leave behind the keys was because we obtained a set of spatial tearing techniques from the immortal palace. This set of techniques was very mysterious, but the spiritual power it required was also very frightening. With our cultivation levels, we were basically unable to use it. Later, we thought of a way to slowly seal the spiritual aura required by this set of spatial tearing techniques into 5 magic weapons. This way, it would be much more convenient for us to come back in the future. As for why we didn't come back, I don't know. Right now, I'm just a wisp of divine sense, so what I know is limited to the time when it was sealed. Then this set of spatial tearing techniques, Fu Yaozi sighed softly and said, in the past, the 5 of us couldn't completely trust each other, so we divided the set of spatial tearing techniques into 5 parts for safety. Of course, I can pass this part to you, but whether the other 4 passed it down or not, I can't do anything about it. Mo Tianga was silent. If that was the case, then this matter couldn't be forced. Once all the nascent soul cultivators had entered, Master Daoist Yuanmu said, fellow Taoists, if you want to leave, you can directly leave from here, but after you leave, you can't enter again. Alright, we don't know how many fated chances and dangers there are in this ancient land, so we'll leave it to our own luck. Most of the nascent soul cultivators present had already found allies before they entered this secret place. Now, after a brief discussion, they left in 2s and 3s. The 5 core formation juniors who had sacred objects didn't move, and the others had to listen to the instructions of their elders. Mo Tianga, however, couldn't figure out what these late nascent soul seniors were thinking. Master Daoist Yuanmu and Yu Shusheng also seemed to think it was a bit difficult. At this moment, they were frowning and secretly transmitting their voices to each other. After a while, Master Daoist Yuanmu said, little friend Mo, you said before that you learned the method to obtain the immortal opportunity from Senior Fu Yaozi and used it to negotiate with us. Now, are you going to travel with us? Mo Tianga smiled and shook her head. Senior, you must know that the real immortal opportunity is in that immortal palace, but you don't know how to obtain it, right? Master Daoist Yuanmu frowned and nodded. Mo Tianga said, that being the case, it's the same if we meet again in the immortal palace. Let me look for some treasures on my own, okay? To be honest, if I travel with Senior and the others, I'm afraid I won't be able to obtain any benefits. She spoke frankly, so Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't know what to say. If she traveled with them and saw some treasures, she and Qin Shi wouldn't be able to share them equally. Therefore, it was normal for her to want to travel alone. And with Qin Shi's strength, he should be able to protect her before they arrived at the immortal palace. He considered it for a moment then nodded. Alright, as little friend Mo said, we'll meet again in the immortal palace. After he finished speaking, Master Daoist Yuanmu waved his hand and led the group of people from Juyan sect away. Following them were the cultivators from Yushan Academy, Huayan Temple, and other cultivation groups. In the blink of an eye, more than half of them left. Progenitor Miaoing didn't leave. Instead, she greeted the 2 of them with a smile. Fellow Daoist Qin, Madam Qin, are you really not going to travel with others? Qin Shi hesitated for a moment then cupped his hands apologetically. Fellow Daoist Miaoing, we haven't seen each other in a long time, so it's inconvenient for us to travel together. Thank you for your warm hospitality. If there's a chance, I'll thank you again. Progenitor Miaoing smiled and waved her hand. It's just a small matter, fellow Daoist Qin doesn't need to be so polite. That being the case, let's meet again in the Immortal Palace. She didn't waste any more time and left with the cultivators from Jingshu School. Once everyone left, Qin, she said, a few days ago, I passed by you. Not only did this progenitor Miaoing help me find your whereabouts, but she also gave me some healing spiritual pills. Speaking of which, I owe her a favor. Mo Tiange already heard him briefly mention this matter, so she said, if that's the case, we'll just find an opportunity to return her favor. She then looked at him with concern. Senior Marshal Brother, how's your injury? I still have many healing medicinal pills here. How about we wait for a while before going to the Immortal Palace? Chapter 455. The others were in a hurry to walk ahead of the others so that they could find some treasures. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, wasn't in a hurry. She had long learned about a path from Fu Yao, so there was no need for her to fight with others over it. Besides, Fu Yaozi told her that the real fated chances were in the Immortal Palace. She had the virtual sky world, so other fated chances weren't important. As for the treasures in the Immortal Palace, without her Fuxing sword, she couldn't obtain them at all. Master Daoist Yuanmu and the others would definitely be waiting for her. Qin, she thought for a moment, then nodded. All right. After years of recuperation and the elixir given to him by progenitor Miaoying, his injuries were almost healed. However, after the two of them arrived at Immortal Palace, there would be many cultivators in the late nascent soul stage there. At that time, some conflicts would inevitably arise. If he couldn't maintain his best state, it was inevitable that he'd feel a bit powerless. Even though the three young real fire swords' magical power was amazing, he'd only just advanced to the middle stage of the nascent soul stage. The two of them found a secluded place. After confirming there was no one around, Mo Tiange pressed the space between her eyebrows and entered the virtual sky world. The breeze blew gently and the brook gurgled. The virtual sky world was still as serene and tranquil as before. The three spirit beasts were put into the spirit beast bag. Apart from the sound of the wind blowing through the bamboo leaves, there was no other sound. Senior Marshal Brother. Mo Tiange turned to look at Qin Shi. When their eyes met, the two of them involuntarily embraced each other. Ever since they met, they had always been under the watchful eyes of others. They couldn't even be the slightest bit intimate, and they had to constantly be on guard against other people's schemes. Even the joy of reunion had to be suppressed. It wasn't until they entered the virtual sky world that they no longer had to worry about anything else, so they finally dared to release their excitement without any scruples. After a long while, the two of them calmed down and looked at each other with a smile. Only then did they let go of each other and held hands as they returned to the bamboo house. The reunion was naturally exciting, but no matter how happy it was, it had to wait until the matter was over. They didn't have much time. The nascent soul cultivators who entered this space crack would arrive at the Immortal Palace in a few days. They could only be late for a few days at most, and there were still many things to prepare. They couldn't waste any of this time. Senior Brother, this is my newly refined 9 transformations Yang restoration pill. This is the constitution enhancing pill. Hurry up and take it. Now that she knew Qin Shi had lost his Qinkun bag, which was used to store spiritual panaceas, she didn't delay and took out the healing medicinal pills first. Qin Shi took the 2 bottles, then opened the bottle containing the 9 revolutions Yang restoration pill. He sniffed it lightly, then smiled at her. Your pill concocting skills have improved a lot. Back then, you still couldn't concoct this 9 revolutions Yang restoration pill. 9 revolutions Yang restoration pills were healing medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators. Compared to core formation cultivators, medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators were more than 10 times more difficult to concoct. Many famous pill concocting masters in the celestial pole didn't dare to rashly concoct them. Those who could concoct original soul-level pills could be called alchemy grandmasters. Mo Tiange stared at him. It's been 50 years, I have to make some progress. Upon seeing her smile, Qin Shi also showed a faint smile. He no longer delayed and took a 9 revolutions yang restoration pill and a constitution-enhancing pill respectively. He then closed his eyes and began to meditate. Seeing that he had already started to heal his injuries, Mo Tiange no longer disturbed him. She used her divine comprehension to communicate with Fu Yaozi. Master? A soft snort came from the Fusheng sword. Disciple acted on his own. Master won't be angry, right? Fu Yaozi was silent for a while before he sighed softly. You didn't do anything wrong. What's there to be angry about? Mo Tiange's heart warmed when she heard this answer. After spending several years with this master whom she met halfway, she respected him very much because Fu Yaozi never treated his disciples as subordinates or servants like the common high-level cultivators in the cultivation world. He would ask Mo Tiange to do something, but he also gave her enough respect and freedom. This kind of feeling was different from second uncles and her other masters. Second uncle was both strict and concerned about her. He didn't spare any details. Lord Daoist Jinghe allowed her to grow freely, but he also sheltered her under his wings. But no matter which one it was, she felt their love for her. Is this your senior martial brother? Fu Yaozi asked. There was a sense of scrutiny in his voice. Yes. Mo Tiange paused for a moment then asked cautiously, Master, what do you want to say? Is he trustworthy? Fu Yaozi said, you even let him know about an existence like the virtual sky world? Mo Tiange was stunned for a moment, then she said with a smile, Master, he's my Tao companion. If even he can't be trusted, who else in this world can be trusted? In the several years they spent together, she never hid her experiences, and Fu Yaozi also knew about Qin Shi's existence. However, she naturally wouldn't talk about the entanglement between the two of them. Fu Yaozi knew her Tao companion was her senior martial brother, and he also knew the master who accepted her as his disciple was this senior martial brother's elder. However, he didn't know the past between the two of them, so it was inevitable for him to make some connections. Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't hesitate at all, Fu Yaozi stopped doubting her and said, all right, since you trust him, I'll also trust him. Even so, Mo Tiange still heard the disapproval in his words, but she didn't explain anything. It was natural that Fu Yaozi didn't trust Qin Shi. Trust had always been the most difficult thing to build in the cultivation world. Besides, she still hadn't formed her nascent soul, but Qin Shi was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. If she obtained a fated chance to form her deification in the immortal palace, who could believe that Qin Shi wouldn't take it for himself? She could trust him, but Fu Yaozi, whom she'd never met before, couldn't. But Fu Yaozi paused for a moment then said, since you chose to trust him, you have to bear the consequences. Master's divine sense won't exist for long. Maybe when you see a fated chance to form your deification, it'll disappear. At that time. Rest assured, Master. Disciple understands, Mo Tiange answered with a smile. Not to mention that she believed him, even if they really obtained a fated chance to form their deification realm, the two of them might be able to share it. Fu Yaozi didn't say much. He chuckled and said faintly, I've lived for more than 1,000 years, and I've seen many brothers falling out with each other and husband and wife becoming enemies. I hope your trust is worth it. Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't answer. 2 days later, Qin Shi opened his eyes. He looked down at his hands, feeling that his whole body was full of spiritual aura, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Mo Tiange concocted the 9 transformations yang restoration pill. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for the hidden injuries on his body to completely heal in these 2 short days. As if sensing his breath, Mo Tiange stepped into the bamboo house from outside. She was pleasantly surprised. Senior martial brother, Qin Shi smiled and said to her, I'm fine now. Mo Tiange was still puzzled when she saw his appearance. Since your injuries have healed, why do you still look like this? His white hair was still there, but his appearance hadn't recovered. Qin Shi said, I've never taken anything like a look-preserving pill. Before I practiced the pure yang technique, my appearance was like this with my cultivation level. Later, I practiced the pure yang technique. This technique has the effect of retaining my appearance, so it hasn't changed since. Mo Tiange nodded to show that she understood. At that time, he was only about 100 years old, but he was already a core formation cultivator. Normally, he should have looked like this. When I was injured in the South Sea, my cultivation level was temporarily damaged. Even my pure yang technique also regressed by a realm, so my appearance changed. My injuries are healed now, but the pure yang technique can only retain my appearance, so. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, but she soon realized something was wrong. But compared to a nascent soul cultivator, your appearance shouldn't be like this at your age. He was less than 300 years old now. Compared to a nascent soul cultivator's lifespan, which was more than 1,000 years, how young was he? Qin Shi's gaze shifted, but in the end, he said helplessly, when I was injured, the power of my nascent soul was sealed. For a period of time, I could only display my core formation cultivation level. What he said shocked Mo Tiange. Soon after, she glared at him and said angrily, "Senior martial brother." His nascent soul was sealed. In other words, he almost fell back to the core formation realm. He actually didn't tell her that he was injured to this extent before? Qin Shi smiled bitterly. Don't be angry. I have the art of 3 primordial cycles. Even if I fell back to the core formation realm, I could cultivate it back very quickly. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. Look, I'm much better now. What does it matter what kind of injuries I suffered before? But, although she said that, Mo Tiange knew his foundation must have been injured. His cultivation level was still in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. His strength in fights of magical powers was strong, so it didn't seem to affect him. However, if he wanted to make a realm breakthrough, he would have to spend a lot more time. I've already thought about this matter, Qin Shi said. Advancing to the middle stage of the nascent soul realm this time was a shortcut. Even if this didn't happen, I still had to cultivate in the middle stage for 100 years to stabilize my foundation so that I could advance further in the future. Now, I just need to spend a bit more time, so it won't affect me too much. Mo Tiange was silent for a long time. In the end, she could only sigh helplessly. You've already thought about it. What can I do? Fine, I'm about to form my nascent soul now. As long as the fated chance is right, I can enter the nascent soul realm. At that time, I can also help you with your matters. It won't be like before, when I could only watch helplessly. Qin Shi felt warmth in his heart. He held her hand and whispered, I understand your feelings. Ever since they made up their minds, he never doubted the feelings between them. Just like how he would do his best to do something for her, she would also do the same. He smiled again and said, if my appearance can't be restored, will you despise me? Hearing this, Mo Tiange glared at him. If you want to stay young, a look-preserving pill is enough. Appearance is just an appearance. What's so important to us immortal cultivators? Although look-preserving pills were very precious for ordinary cultivators, even aura-refining female cultivators with some background would try their best to buy them, let alone them. In the cultivation world, many powerful nascent soul cultivators never took look-preserving pills because it wasn't worth mentioning to them. Most of the cultivators who valued appearance so much were female cultivators. This was also a small obsession of women. Qin Shi smiled but didn't say anything. Sensing a fluctuation from the Fuxing sword, Fu Yaozi was urging them. Mo Tiange said, Senior martial brother, if you're ready, let's go out. Qin Shi nodded. We've been idle for 2 days. We can't delay it any longer. Although they didn't care about the fated chances outside the immortal palace, being late for too long was always disadvantageous to them. The two of them tidied up briefly then left the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange looked up at the towering immortal palace in the distance and sighed softly. It would be a tough battle to smoothly divide the benefits from so many nascent soul cultivators. Chapter 456. This way. Following Fu Yao's instructions, Mo Tiange led Qin Shi through a forest and circled to the side of the cliff. Below the cliff was a forest of strange stones. The terrain was quite complicated, but it was barren. It didn't look like there were any spiritual treasures growing here. Presumably, no one would choose this path. This place is treacherous. Be careful and don't act rashly. Fu Yao's voice came from inside the Fusheng sword. Mo Tiange softly answered and passed the message to Qin Shi. Qin Shi frowned and quickly released his divine sense. This place. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. There's devil aura lurking here. Do we really have to go through this place? Let's go. Mo Tiange answered him with her actions and walked towards the stone forest. There were strange restrictions in this space. If they flew unscrupulously, they might unknowingly be trapped and die without a burial place. Because of that, all nascent soul cultivators who entered this place, regardless of their cultivation level or how many people they traveled with, they all cautiously flew close to the ground. Seeing how certain she was, Qin Shi didn't say anything and followed her inside. After carefully observing her surroundings, Mo Tiange took out the lotus elemental umbrella and opened it. At first glance, the foot of the mountain was quiet and didn't seem to be abnormal. However, the treacherous aura hidden here made her feel uneasy. Fu Yao previously reminded her that this was a shortcut, but there were hidden dangers. She had to put away her curiosity and not touch anything casually. As for the lotus elemental umbrella, it originally had the effect of expelling devil aura. After leaving Shi, Mo Tiange followed Fu Yao's instructions and practiced a cultivation technique that could restrain devil aura. She also refined all her magic weapons so that they had the ability to restrain devil aura. Now, the lotus elemental umbrella had extraordinary power in restraining devil aura. Mo Tiange suddenly realized that whether it was cultivation techniques or magic weapons, she was slowly becoming the nemesis of devil cultivators. From now on, wouldn't she have a huge advantage if she ran into devil cultivators? She then recalled Nia Wushang's previous statement that she didn't want to be her enemy and couldn't help but laugh. If she knew, she would definitely be glad she had foresight, right? What are you laughing at? Qin Shi asked. I think Nia Wushang is very interesting. The lotus dragon umbrella floated above the two of them. Its faint fluorescent light shrouded them, isolating them from the strange aura. Qin Shi didn't ask any more questions. He raised his head to look at the lotus umbrella and said, "It seems you've had a lot of fated chances in the past 50 years. I remember this umbrella didn't have this kind of power back then." Mo Tiange didn't hide anything from him and told him about Fu Yaozi. The two of them chatted as they walked, and they slowly walked through most of the stone forest. All of a sudden, Qin Shi stopped and said, "There's someone ahead." Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. There's actually someone who took this path? There was a cliff on the left and a forest on the right. It was very difficult to find this place. If it were not for Fu Yaozi's reminder, it would have been very difficult for an ordinary person to find this place. Qin Shi said, "There are so many people who entered this cleft space, and they're all nascent soul cultivators. It's not strange that someone happened to find this place." Mo Tiange nodded. "Let's continue and ignore them." Yes. Qin Shi had no objections. With Master Daoist Yuanmu's words, presumably, the cultivators who came here wouldn't dare and wouldn't attack them. After a while, Mo Tiange's divine sense also sensed spiritual aura fluctuations from a fight of magical powers. She wrinkled her brows and said, "Could it be that they're fighting over something?" Qin Shi said, "That must be the case. They came here to look for fated chances, and the so-called fated chances also included unique treasures. Presumably, these two groups of cultivators found treasures that could help their cultivation, so they started fighting over them." Even so, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi still moved forward at a moderate pace. They neither sped up nor deliberately avoided the fight. The other side seemed to be a bit afraid of them, so it stopped fighting. "There are a lot of people." Qin Shi frowned slightly. 6 people. But he didn't say anything. The two of them continued flying in the same direction. Before long, the silhouettes of 6 nascent soul cultivators came into view. Among them, 3 were in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, while the other 2 were in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. All of them had just fought a fight of magical powers, so their spiritual breaths were unstable. Some of them were even seriously injured. Not far from them, there was an unremarkable withered vine that emitted a faint spiritual aura. Fellow Taoists. Before Qin Shi and Mo Tiange could speak, one of the 6 people already shouted loudly. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi stopped several dozen feet away from them. Qin Shi said, "Fellow Taoists, what can I do for you?" The nascent soul cultivator who spoke was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. He looked to be in his 50s and was dressed like a wealthy man from the secular world. Only the feather fan in his hand shone brightly, adding a hint of immortality to his appearance. He smiled and cupped his hands. "I'm Nan Guotian from Danxia sect. You must be fellow Daoist Qin and little fellow Daoist Mo, the ones with the Fusheng sword, right?" Qin Shi's expression was indifferent. He nodded and returned the greeting. Yes. The two of them had long been recognized by everyone, so Nan Guotian only asked casually. He then chuckled and said, "This space is so big, but we were unexpectedly able to meet 2 fellow Taoists. It must be fate. May I know where fellow Taoists are going? Would you like to come with us?" Mo Tiange frowned inwardly. These 6 people were obviously enemies. There were still spiritual aura fluctuations in the air, but Nan Guotian was now inviting them to come with him. Before she and Qin Shi could answer, the other nascent soul cultivator snorted coldly and said, "Fellow Daoist Nan, what do you mean? The outcome of our battle hasn't been decided yet you're already so impatient to rope in fellow Taoists Qin and Mo?" Nan Guotian's expression didn't change at all when he heard this sarcastic remark. He still wore a smile on his face and said, "Hee, there's no difference whether I ask you now or later. Why are you so impatient, fellow Daoist Qi?" Everyone could hear the sarcasm in Nan Guotian's words. The stern-faced cultivator confronting Nan Guotian looked angry. Just as he was about to speak, Qin Shi said, "Fellow Taoists, my wife and I were just passing by, so we won't stay any longer. Farewell." Once he finished speaking, he indifferently swept his gaze over the withered vine behind the 6 people. He cast a glance at Mo Tiange before the 2 of them flew away without stopping. "Fellow Daoist Qin." Nan Guotian called out from behind them. When he didn't get a response, he heaved a sigh of relief. He shifted his gaze to the withered vine, and his eyes immediately lit up. His smiling face was now filled with a murderous aura. After flying for a while, the 2 of them slowed down and walked in silence for a while. Qin Shi said, "Looks like a lot of people will die." Mo Tiange frowned and sighed. Yes. That withered vine looked unremarkable, but it contained a faint and pure wood spirit spiritual aura. If she wasn't mistaken, this withered vine was at least 10,000 years old. This was the time when wood spirit spiritual aura was at its fullest and was about to wither. The wood spirit spiritual aura inside could be absorbed for one's own use or made into a magic weapon. It was no wonder that several nascent soul cultivators from both sides were willing to risk their lives to fight over such a treasure. After entering the nascent soul realm, one's cultivation speed would be extremely slow. Only a spiritual treasure like this would have a significant effect. If it was made into a magic weapon, it would be an astonishing spiritual treasure. The foot of the mountain was only an ordinary place in this spatial crack, but it unexpectedly had such a spiritual treasure. It could be imagined how many treasures there were in this place. However, the appearance of a spiritual treasure was a fated chance, but it was also a calamity. Most of the nascent soul cultivators in Yunzhong had entered this space, but it was unknown how many of them could come out alive. The 2 of them just sighed and didn't think too much about it. They continued to walk their own paths. This was the rule of the cultivation world, the survival of the fittest. If one wanted to become a great cultivator above others and find the path to immortality, they had to survive in this kind of cruel competition. It was the same for them as well. Be careful here. Fu Yaozi's voice came from the Fusheng sword on her back. Mo Tiange vigilantly released the art of divine origin. As soon as Qin Shi saw her movements, he immediately took out the 3 Yang real fire sword. The 3 Yang real fire sword's light flashed, and a powerful momentum enveloped them. The lotus umbrella floating above them instantly shone with a dazzling light. There's devil aura. Mo Tiange turned her palm and opened the heaven and earth fan. Under Fu Yaozi's guidance, the lotus umbrella had been modified, so it was very sensitive to devil aura. The slightest bit of devil aura would alarm it. Don't move. Fu Yaozi immediately reminded them, the devil aura here is very strange. The more powerful the spiritual aura you release, the more powerful its backlash will be. Mo Tiange was stunned and told Qin Shi what he said. Qin Shi frowned. What should we do? If that was the case, wouldn't they have spells but couldn't use them? Fu Yaozi said, use the devil-subduing art I taught you and use your breath-concealing technique. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment then asked, Master, then my senior martial brother, Fu Yaozi said faintly, since you trust him, teach him. Thank you, Master. Mo Tiange was delighted. The devil-subduing art was an ancient technique. Its content was quite simple. With Qin Shi's current cultivation level and Mo Tiange's explanation, it didn't take him long to master the technique. The two of them put away their magic weapons according to Fu Yaozi's instructions and used the devil-subduing art together with the breath-concealing technique. Sure enough, the devil aura that rose sharply just now dissipated a lot. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh at herself. Just now, she really thought she was smart. As soon as Fu Yaozi reminded her, she immediately used the art of origin to cause spiritual aura fluctuations. Then, Qin Shi released the 3 Yang real fire sword, which caused the devil aura to rise sharply. The further they went, the more devil aura drifted around. It wasn't strong, but it surrounded the two of them tightly. The more Mo Tiange walked, the more strange she felt. This devil aura, what's wrong? Qin Shi asked casually while looking around. Mo Tiange frowned and thought for a long time before she finally said, don't you think this devil aura is very familiar? Familiar? Qin Shi sensed it for a while and said in shock, primordial devil aura. Yes. Although this devil aura was faint, its aura was exactly the same as primordial devil aura. You also know about primordial devil aura? Fu Yaozi's surprised voice came from the Fusheng sword. Mo Tiange said, Master, do you remember I once met a martial cultivator who eventually turned into a devil cultivator? The devil aura she swallowed was primordial devil aura. I see. Master, so the strange aura you mentioned is primordial devil aura? What's going on? Fu Yaozi was silent for a while then said, since you know about primordial devil aura, there's no harm in telling you in detail. Yes, this so-called primordial devil aura is the strangest thing in this spatial crack. Chapter 457. Back then, I was still a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator with an undeserved reputation in Cloud Zhong. At that time, there was a legend in the returning ruined sea that an immortal mountain would appear every 100 years. Those who were fated to see it would be able to step onto the path of immortality. All of my abilities come from the ancient ruins, so I am quite knowledgeable about such legends. Fu Yaozi said slowly, legends that have been passed down for a long time will usually change in the process of being passed down, but most of them aren't groundless. Thus, I went to the legendary place in the returning ruined sea to search for traces of this legend. Master, you're talking about this spatial rift? That's right. Fu Yaozi said, I searched for several years in the returning ruined sea and finally found some clues. Coincidentally, I found the legendary immortal mountain in the sea. The cultivation world of 100,000 years ago was no different from today. Since an immortal opportunity had appeared, cultivators naturally scrambled for it. In fact, the so-called immortal mountain was just a mirage. The real immortal opportunity wasn't at the immortal mountain. Fu Yaozi understood this point, which was why he was able to find this spatial crack. The clues that Fu Yaozi had left behind had led the other four to this place as well. They were the other four cultivators who were later called the 5 sages in Cloud Zhong. These 5 cultivators, 2 Taoists, 1 Buddhist, 1 Confucian, and 1 fiend, belonged to different forces, but they were all outstanding cultivators of the current era. After entering the spatial rift, they were first on guard against each other, then went their own ways. Finally, they realized that the space here was far beyond their abilities, so they had to work together to explore. Their experience in this space could be said to be a narrow escape. Fortunately, they were all extremely intelligent people. After letting go of their past hatred, they obtained amazing opportunities and shared the space-tearing technique. When they came out of the spatial rift, because they didn't trust each other, they destroyed the passage and split the space-tearing technique into 5. Then, each of them cultivated amazing abilities and became the top cultivators in Cloud Zhong. They were called the 5 sages. It could be said that without this space, without the opportunities here, there wouldn't be the 5 sages in Cloud Zhong. The 5 of us are all intelligent people who cultivated to this realm, but after entering this space, we were hindered everywhere and had no choice but to work together. The biggest reason is the primordial devil chi. Upon hearing up to this point, Mo Tinga asked, Master, although the primordial devil aura I've seen before is powerful, it's never reached this level. What's the mystery behind the primordial devil aura in this space? Fu Yaozi chuckled lightly and said, Master is unable to answer this question of yours. Because of the limitations of our cultivations, we were merely able to obtain a fortuitous encounter from it all those years ago, and we were unable to fully explore its profundities. Then how did you encounter the primordial devil chi back then? Fu Yaozi was silent for a long time before replying, There is an underground palace beneath this immortal palace. Underground palace? That's right. Fu Yaozi said, This prime devil chi came from a stone tablet in the underground palace. Stone tablet. Mo Tianga's expression changed. What's wrong? Qin Shi turned to look at her. Mo Tianga gave him a meaningful glance, then continued to communicate with Fu Yaozi with her divine comprehension. Master, in this underground palace, is there one of the 5 spirits enshrined? Fu Yaozi paused for a moment and was a little surprised. That's right, how did you know? Another 5 spirits sacrificial temple. Mo Tianga couldn't help but recall her own speculation. When she was in the foundation building realm, she met Ren Yufeng, a disciple of Zhengfa sect, in the northernmost glaciers. Because of that, Ren Yufeng walked on the devil path. After coming to Yunzhong, Feifei said that there was one in the Carefree Valley. Then, he found out that the Starfall City Lord, Mei Feng, who lived near the Carefree Valley, practiced the primordial demon great technique. Now, Prime Devil Chi had been discovered in the returning Ruin Sea spatial rift, and Fu Yaozi had confirmed that there was also a 5-soul sacrificial temple in the returning Ruin Sea, with a stone tablet that emanated Prime Devil Chi. She had once made a deduction about this matter. A sacrificial temple that enshrined one of the 5 spirits and a strange stone tablet could be used to comprehend the Prime Devil Grand Technique. This matter was related to 3 people, Ren Yufeng, Master Song Feng, and City Lord Mei. The reason Ren Yufeng couldn't cultivate the real primordial devil art was probably because his cultivation level was too low and his comprehension wasn't good. There was no doubt that Master Song Feng and City Lord Mei had cultivated the Prime Devil Great Technique. And now, Fu Yaozi had said that there was another one in the spatial rift. In that case, there were 4 of them. The 5 spiritual beings were the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, Black Tortoise, and Qilin. In that case, the so-called Divine Dragon Sacrificial Temple was actually the Azure Dragon Sacrificial Temple. Just what kind of mysteries did this 5-spirit sacrificial temple left behind by the primordial era contain? Master, which of the 5 spirits is this shrine dedicated to? It's a vermilion bird. Fu Yaozi was puzzled. Have you seen it before? Mo Tiange took a deep breath and said, yes. Mo Tiange saw that he was deep in thought, so she asked, what's wrong? Did you think of something? Qin Shi was meticulous, so maybe he could think of something she didn't. Qin Shi said, I haven't seen the others with my own eyes, but I've seen the dragon bones you got from the northernmost area. Yes, is there a problem? It'd be strange if there's no problem, Qin Shi said. The dragon bones' momentum was strong and holy, so they shouldn't be fake. In other words, that sacrificial temple worshipped the real 5 spirits. That being the case, why was there a stone tablet emitting devil aura? This was also something Mo Tiange couldn't understand, so she didn't answer. She just stared at Qin Shi, waiting for him to continue. I can only think of one possibility. Qin Shi paused for a moment, then said slowly, suppression. Mo Tiange was stunned, but she suddenly understood. I see. Using the power of the 5 spirits to suppress the primordial devil qi. Qin Shi looked at her and said with a smile, this is only a possibility, not necessarily the truth. Moreover, there's something that doesn't make sense. Several people have obtained this stone tablet. Although they comprehended the devil art from it, it didn't have much power. That being the case, why did they suppress it instead of destroying it? Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then said, this can't be explained. The primordial devil aura in this space was able to give the 5 sages such a headache back then, so it's obviously very powerful. Therefore, the primordial devil aura on this stone tablet should have been very powerful, while the stone tablets obtained by other people, for some reason or because of the passage of time, lost their former might. Qin Shi thought for a moment, then nodded. What you said isn't impossible. However, this sacrificial temple is a relic from the distant past era, and it's not even recorded in ancient books. What's going on is only our guess. Mo Tiange temporarily gave up on exploring. She thought for a moment, then said, but we still have to go down to this underground palace. If we have a chance, we'll take that stone tablet with us. By the way, you got Mei Feng's Qinkuan bag. Is there a similar stone tablet inside? Upon hearing that, Qin Shi took out Mei Feng's Qinkuan bag from his robe and searched inside. Sure enough, he found a heavy stone tablet. Mo Tiange looked at it. It was similar to the one Ren Yufeng got, but the thing engraved on it was different. It wasn't an azure dragon but a black tortoise. Sure enough, it's the black tortoise sacrificial temple. After finding this stone tablet, part of her guess was confirmed. The 5 spirits sacrificial temple, the stone tablet, and the primordial devil art were indeed related. Qin Shi threw the stone tablet back and said, we'll study it when we have time. After thinking for a moment, she was still worried, so she warned him again, when I touched the stone tablet that day, I almost lost my mind. You have to be careful. Qin Shi smiled and said, rest assured. The reason your mind was so easily taken away that day was probably because your cultivation level wasn't high enough. Didn't you give that stone tablet to Master? Nothing happened to Master, which means I'll also be fine. She was only in the foundation building realm that day, so her mental state and divine sense couldn't be compared to that of a nascent soul cultivator. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.